To understand what's really happening, you have to learn to listen to the silence. Not the silence between words on a news broadcast, but the silence that hides behind them. You have to learn to see not the explosion itself, but the faint ripple it leaves on the surface of reality. The 21st century didn't begin with technological breakthroughs or new ideologies. It began with a deafening roar. The roar of a new arms race, where the grand prize was absolute, undeniable supremacy. The name of this prize? Hypersonics. Speed turned into a weapon. A weapon turned into a god. We're told this is a new chapter in the age-old story of human conflict. Moscow threatens Washington. Washington answers Beijing. Beijing flexes its muscles for its neighbors. It's all logical, all fitting into the familiar worldview they show us in the evening. It's a shadow play, performed on the world stage, and we are the obedient audience, applauding every new act of this deadly spectacle. But what if we're looking at the wrong stage? What if the real performance is unfolding not on our television screens, but in the cold, silent void above our heads? What if all this noise, this entire steel symphony of destruction, all these billions poured into creating missiles that fly at 5, 10, 20 times the speed of sound, is just a desperate, almost hysterical attempt to get the attention of someone who isn't listening? Or even more terrifying, an attempt to silence someone who is already far too close. Today, we begin to unravel a thread that leads to the most unsettling secret of our time. A secret that begins with two seemingly unrelated events that occurred on the same day, at the same hour. Two events that official science and military agencies will never place side by side. But we will. Because in their suspicious synchronicity lies the key to everything. Imagine the morning of October 12th, 2024. A cold, piercing morning at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Here, amidst the rugged, wind-swept coastal hills, lies one of America's most secret facilities. A place where the Earth is riddled with launch silos. A place where, for decades, the world's most powerful intercontinental ballistic missiles have slumbered, capable of erasing entire civilizations from the face of the Earth in minutes. But on this morning, the air was electrified in a special way. In an underground bunker, dozens of feet below the surface, a tense, almost palpable silence reigned. Dozens of officers and engineers, pale in the glow of hundreds of monitors, were frozen at their consoles. Their eyes were fixed on the central screen, which displayed a countdown. This was no ordinary readiness check. This was the culmination of years of work, the climax of a project that had consumed the best minds and unlimited resources. The test of the newest hypersonic glide vehicle, known by the code name Arrowhead. This isn't just a missile. It's a technological marvel that defies the laws of physics. First, a heavy Minuteman III ICBM, a relic of the Cold War, was to lift the vehicle to an altitude of about 100 kilometers, around 62 miles. And then, there, on the edge of space, the main event was to occur. The vehicle, shaped like a flattened predatory spearhead, would separate and begin its own unpredictable flight. It didn't fall in a ballistic arc like a normal warhead. No, it was designed to glide through the dense layers of the atmosphere, performing breathtaking maneuvers at speeds exceeding Mach 20, over 27,000 kilometers per hour, nearly 17,000 miles per h. Imagine that energy. A cocoon of superheated plasma, enveloping the craft, making it invisible to radar and invulnerable to any existing missile defense system. This is not an interception weapon. This is a weapon of a first decapitating strike. And so, when the timer on the screen hit 0, the Earth trembled. From the silo, Wrapped in clouds of white smoke and fire, a 100-ton steel monster erupted. For a moment, it hung over the launch pad, as if gathering its strength, and then, with a deafening roar, it tore into the gray, leaden sky. In the bunker, no one breathed. On the screens, endless columns of telemetry flashed by. Altitude, speed, temperature, pressure. Everything was nominal. The booster performed perfectly. And then came the key moment. Separation. At an altitude of 98 kilometers, about 61 miles, the Arrowhead vehicle detached from the final stage and began its independent journey. On the monitors, its marker became a fiery dot racing over the planet. In a matter of minutes, it was supposed to hit a designated target at the Reagan test site on the Kwajalein Atoll, nearly 6,000 kilometers, about 3,700 miles, away. And on that very same day, a few hours later, the Pentagon issued a short but crystal clear press release. A successful test launch of a missile with the Arrowhead Hypersonic glide vehicle has been conducted. During its flight, the glide vehicle performed controlled maneuvers and successfully struck the designated target at the specified time. The system's tactical and technical characteristics and capabilities have been confirmed. Global news agencies exploded with headlines. Analysts in Moscow and Beijing scrambled to comment on another provocative step by Washington. Politicians expressed deep concern. Another move was made on the geopolitical chessboard. A loud, demonstrative, frightening move. Everything was on the surface. Everything was understood. This was event number 1, the trickster event. Noisy, bright, capturing the attention of the entire world. But while the cameras showed launch footage, while experts drew possible flight paths on maps in a completely different domain. In the world of quiet data and astronomical observations, event number 2 was taking place. An event that wasn't reported in the news. An event that, at first glance, had nothing to do with the thunder on the California coast. But only at first glance. At the very same time the booster carrying the Arrowhead was leaving its silo at an altitude of about 500 kilometers, around 310 miles, above that same point on the globe, in the perfect silence of space, one of the strangest objects ever recorded in our solar system was passing by. Its official designation is 3I Atlas. Let's break that down. I stands for interstellar, meaning this object came to us from the depths of the galaxy, from another star. The number 3 means it's only the third such visitor we've been able to detect. The first was the famous cigar-shaped Oumuamua in 2017. The second was Comet 2I Borisov in 2019. Atlas is the name of the automated telescope system in Hawaii that first detected it. So, 3I Atlas, the third interstellar wanderer. When it was discovered in late 2023, astronomers initially classified it as a comet. Its orbit was distinctly hyperbolic, meaning it wasn't orbiting the sun, but merely passing through our system, never to return. But very quickly, things got strange. 3I Atlas had no coma, the gas and dust cloud that should surround a comet's nucleus as it nears the sun. Spectral analysis showed no signs of outgassing or ice sublimation. This object was solid, cold, and completely inert. Moreover, it was dark. Incredibly dark. Almost like coal, reflecting only a tiny fraction of the sunlight that fell on it. Its trajectory was even more mysterious. It was too perfect, too precise. It was moving with a slight but constant non-gravitational acceleration that couldn't be explained by any known natural causes. It was as if it was steering, making tiny but deliberate course corrections. The astronomical community was divided. The official version, cautiously promoted by leading institutions, was that it was likely a rare type of asteroid, perhaps rich in nitrogen ice that evaporated invisibly to our instruments. But for many independent researchers and amateur astronomers, the explanation was different. 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a piece of rock or ice. It was behaving like an artificial object, like a probe, like a scout. And now we come to the crucial point. The point where these two events, the fiery roar of a hypersonic weapon and the silent flight of an interstellar wanderer, intersect. The launch window for the Arrowhead test was incredibly narrow. It was determined by dozens of factors. Weather, the position of potential adversaries' spy satellites, the readiness of the receiving test site at Kwajalein. Officially, October 12th was chosen as the ideal day. But there's another set of data that no one included in the official report. The ephemeris, the precise coordinates of 3I Atlas in the celestial sphere. And here is what that data shows. At the moment of the missile launch from Vandenberg, at 0315 Coordinated Universal Time, the object 3I Atlas was almost directly at the zenith above the launch silo. Its orbital track passed with pinpoint accuracy over the flight corridor of the booster rocket. It was a perfect, astronomically precise rendezvous. A coincidence? Perhaps. The probability of such a coincidence is infinitesimally small, but it exists. Things are always happening in space. However, this was not the first such coincidence. A year earlier, during the test of a Russian hypersonic prototype, the avant-garde 3I Atlas was also making its perihelion, the closest point in its orbit to the Sun, passing over that same region. 6 months later, when China conducted a demonstration launch of its DFZF hypersonic glider from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, 3I Atlas was again in an optimal observation point, this time on another leg of its strange, elongated orbit. Time after time, launch after launch, in different parts of the planet, at different times, humanity's most advanced, most secret military programs inexplicably synchronized with the flyby of this dark, cold object from the interstellar void. This no longer looks like a coincidence. This looks like choreography. A meticulously planned dance in which one side is loud, aggressive, and desperate, and the other is silent, invisible, and incomprehensible. And here, we must ask the main question. The one question they are afraid to ask aloud in the corridors of the Pentagon, the Ministry of Defense, and China's Central Military Commission. What if the official version is just a smokescreen? A convenient and understandable cover, hiding a truth that is too vast and too terrible for our comprehension? What if the new arms race isn't about us competing with each other? What if all these tests, all these demonstration launches aimed at designated targets on distant test ranges, actually have a completely different real target? A target that is not on Earth. A target moving at incredible speed in low Earth orbit. A target we are desperately trying to hit. And time again, we miss. What if all these loud pronouncements of successful tests are a lie? A lie designed to hide from the entire world the fact that we have entered a war we cannot even declare. A war against something we don't understand. And in this war, we are losing. A few hours after the October 12th launch, as the world discussed the new round of tensions between East and West, the agencies released their statements, blaming it all on geopolitics. Everything was smooth, logical, and simple. Too simple. Because in the initial, raw telemetry data that for a few seconds leaked onto a secure DoD server before being deleted, the trajectory of the Arrowhead looked different. In the first moments of its independent flight, it wasn't flying east, towards Kwajalein. It was flying up, almost vertically up, towards a point where, at that moment, there was nothing. Nothing, except the cold, dark, and silent ghost from another star system. And that is no longer a data error. That is a choice they made for us. And they are desperately trying to hide the consequences. At first glance, the official story is flawless. It has the power of simplicity and rests on decades of established practice. The military tested a weapon. The weapon worked. The target was hit. End of story. Anyone who dares to question this is immediately branded a conspiracist, a conspiracy theorist, a useful idiot working for enemy intelligence. The mechanism for defending the narrative is perfected. It relies not on evidence, but on habit. We are used to missiles flying from west to east. We are used to the military talking about designated targets. We are used to the world being divided into warring blocks. And in this familiar picture of the world, there's no room for anomalies. There's no room for Object 3I, Atlas. Its existence is just background noise, a curious fact from the world of astronomy with no bearing on the harsh reality of geopolitics. But it is here, in this seeming flawlessness, that the first crack appears. Tiny, almost invisible, but if you press on it, the entire carefully constructed edifice begins to crumble. And to find this crack, we need to take a journey. A journey to the edge of the world, to an atoll in the Marshall Islands, to a place called the Reagan Test Site. The Reagan Test Site at Kwajalein Atoll is not just a piece of land. It's a giant catcher's mitt spread over hundreds of square kilometers in the middle of the wild, desolate Pacific. Its official name is the U.S. Army Kwajalein Atoll Test Site. But behind this dull bureaucratic title lies one of the most important and heavily guarded military zones on the planet. Since the 1960s, Kwajalein has been the final destination for all test flights of American intercontinental ballistic missiles. Imagine the process. A missile launches from a silo somewhere in California or North Dakota. It climbs into space, accelerates to orbital velocity, deploys its warheads, and these warheads, after a long flight through the vacuum, re-enter the atmosphere over the Pacific. And here, Kwajalein is waiting for them. A whole network of the most advanced radars, telescopes, telemetry stations, and seismic sensors. Their job is to record everything. Absolutely everything. Re-entry speed, angle of attack, impact accuracy, the yield of the dummy charge. For decades, this mechanism has worked like clockwork. Launch, flight, impact recording at Kwajalein. It is a sacred ritual of the Cold War that continues to this day. The official story states that on October 12th, 2024, this ritual was followed exactly. The Arrowhead, launched from Vandenberg, flew at 6,000 kilometers, about 3,700 miles, and successfully hit its target in the designated grid square at the Reagan Test Site. The Department of Defense even released blurry drone footage showing a fiery streak in the night sky and a subsequent flash on the ground. It all looked convincing. But here is where logic begins to fail. To understand this, we need to delve into the physics of hypersonic flight. This is not just flying at high speed. This is existing on the edge of what's possible. When an object moves through the atmosphere at Mach 20, it ceases to be just a piece of metal. It turns into a cocoon of superheated plasma. The temperature on its surface reaches 2,000 degrees Celsius, over 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the melting point of steel. The air in front of it ionizes, becoming a shield impenetrable to radio waves. To control such an object is like trying to control a bolt of lightning. Any maneuver, any deviation from its course requires colossal energy expenditure and creates unimaginable G-forces. Officially, the main advantage of the Arrowhead is its ability to maneuver. Not just to fly straight, but to perform deep maneuvers, both in course and altitude. This makes its trajectory unpredictable and interception impossible. And the Pentagon's press release clearly stated, during its flight, the glide vehicle performed controlled maneuvers. It sounds impressive, but let's think about what that means from a physics perspective. Every maneuver at such speed is a monstrous loss of energy. The atmosphere at these altitudes, though thin, is still dense enough to create immense drag. Imagine a flat stone you skip across the surface of water. With each skip, it loses speed until it finally sinks. A hypersonic glider is that same stone, but instead of water, it's the atmosphere. And instead of the strength of your muscles, it's the initial impulse from a giant intercontinental ballistic missile. This initial energy reserve is finite. It must be spent very sparingly over the entire 6,000-kilometer journey to Kwajalein. Therefore, the optimal trajectory for such a flight is a so-called skipping or wave rider trajectory. The glider enters the atmosphere at a very shallow angle, bounces off its denser layers back into thinner ones, flies some distance, and dives again. This minimizes energy loss and maximizes range. It's an elegant but very fragile balance. Now let's go back to that snippet of telemetry that leaked onto the web for a few moments, to those few seconds of data that were immediately deleted, but not before a few independent observers managed to copy them. This data pertained to the very beginning of the Arrowhead's independent flight, right after separating from the booster rocket at an altitude of about 100 kilometers, 62 miles. And this data doesn't just raise questions, it completely shatters the official picture. According to this short file, the initial vector of the vehicle's movement was not directed along a nearly horizontal trajectory towards Kwajalein. Its angle of attack was 87 degrees to the horizon. 87 degrees. That's a nearly vertical ascent. It didn't start gliding east. It shot upwards, into open space. Here we must stop and grasp the full depth of this contradiction. For a hypersonic glider to begin its long 6,000-kilometer flight to Kwajalein, it needs a nearly horizontal initial impulse. It must fly along the Earth's surface, but if you launch it almost vertically, you are doing something illogical. You are wasting precious kinetic energy fighting gravity, gaining altitude that is completely unnecessary for horizontal flight. But the most terrifying thing isn't even that. Imagine the Arrowhead did indeed launch upwards. To then get on course for Kwajalein, it would have had to perform a monstrous, unthinkable maneuver. It would have had to turn almost 90 degrees while on the edge of the atmosphere. Such a maneuver isn't just deep maneuvering, it's energetic suicide. The loss of speed and energy would have been so colossal that any flight to Kwajalein would have been out of the question. It would have simply plummeted somewhere over the Pacific, not even a third of the way there. The official version of hitting the target at Kwajalein and the data on a nearly vertical launch are mutually exclusive. They cannot both be true. One of them is a lie. And this is where our first alternative source enters the stage. This is not an anonymous insider. This is a man with a name and a reputation. His name is Dr. Michael Sterling. In the past, he was a lead design engineer at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, the very place where many legendary aerospace systems, including the predecessors to modern hypersonic platforms, were created. Today, Sterling is retired, living in Arlington, Virginia, and runs a small but highly respected internet forum dedicated to aerospace engineering. It's a place where old Cold War engineers and young enthusiasts discuss things not written about in official publications. And it was Sterling who was one of the first to analyze that leaked telemetry fragment. He didn't spin conspiracy theories. He simply did what he had done his entire life. He ran the numbers. He built a mathematical model. Using open source data on the Arrowhead's mass, its presumed aerodynamic characteristics, and the initial parameters from the leaked file, he calculated its subsequent trajectory. His conclusions, published on the forum as a dry 20-page report with graphs and formulas, were like an explosion. The conclusion was unequivocal. With an initial vector of 87 degrees and a subsequent maneuver to get on a trajectory to Kwajalein, the Arrowhead would have lost up to 75% of its kinetic energy in the first 3 minutes of flight. The maximum range it could have hoped for after that was no more than 1,500 kilometers, about 930 miles. Not 6,000. 1,500. Stirling's work was the first crack that started to bring down the whole structure. If his calculations are correct, and none of his colleagues on the forum could refute them, it means only one thing. The Arrowhead launched on October 12th never reached Kwajalein. It couldn't have physically made it there. And that, in turn, means that the Pentagon's official statement about a successful target strike and the video of a flash at the Reagan test site are a fabrication. A well-staged performance, a smokescreen designed to hide the real outcome of the test. But why? Why put on such an elaborate show? There can be only one answer. Because the real goal of the test was so important and its results so disastrous that the truth was absolutely unacceptable. They couldn't just say, the test failed. Because this was no ordinary failed test. This was a failure of a completely different, unimaginable magnitude. And here we return to the question of synchronicity. If the Arrowhead wasn't flying to Kwajalein, where was it flying? The answer is given by that initial vector, 87 degrees, almost straight up. The booster rocket put it on a suborbital trajectory, and the glider continued along it. It wasn't flying along the Earth. It was flying away from Earth, to the very point in space where, at that moment, according to astronomical ephemerides, there was only one object. The dark, cold, silent wanderer from another star system, 3I Atlas. This was not a test of a weapon for a war on Earth. This was an attempt at combat deployment, an attempt to strike a target in low Earth orbit, a target moving at 8 kilometers per second, over 17,000 Elstedt. A target that, perhaps, possesses its own defense systems, and that attempt failed. Utterly. Crushingly. The issue wasn't that their flight model was wrong. The issue was that they ignored the data that contradicted it and published a pre-prepared result. This is no longer a mistake. This is a deliberate choice. This is a cover-up protocol. They weren't hiding a technical malfunction. They were hiding a fundamental, humiliating truth. Our most advanced, most formidable weapon, the pinnacle of our technology, proved to be absolutely useless against this target. We didn't just miss. We couldn't even reach it. And so that the world wouldn't learn of this fiasco, they showed us a pretty picture of a flash at Kwajalein. They performed the old familiar play about geopolitical confrontation. Because the truth is far more terrifying. The truth is, they weren't aiming east. They were aiming for the sky. And the sky didn't even notice their shot. Dr. Michael Stirling's calculations were impeccable. They were a cold, relentless verdict against the official story. But in our world, mathematical models, even the most convincing ones, are not proof. They are just a theory, published on a niche internet forum. To turn theory into fact, you need something more. You need independent confirmation. You need a witness. In the modern world, the chief, most impartial witness to everything that happens in near-Earth orbit is not a person. It is a giant, all-seeing system known as the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. And its eyes are the global space surveillance network. Imagine a planetary nervous system. Dozens of powerful radars scattered across the globe, from Alaska to the Kwajalein Atoll. Optical telescopes capable of spotting an object the size of a baseball in the darkness of space. And even special satellites in orbit whose sole purpose is to look down and around, tracking everything that moves. Every day, this network makes hundreds of thousands of observations. It tracks more than 20,000 artificial objects in orbit, active satellites, spent rocket stages, fragments, space debris. Anything larger than 10 centimeters gets its own catalog number and a personal file. This database is the most complete and accurate collection of knowledge about what is happening above our heads. And most importantly, a significant portion of this data is publicly available. Anyone with an internet connection can go to the website spacetrack.org, register, and get access to the satellite catalog. You can track the International Space Station in real time. You can look up the trajectory of an old Soviet spy satellite launched in the 70s. You can find the debris from a Chinese rocket that broke apart 10 years ago. This is a policy of managed transparency. On the one hand, it helps avoid collisions in orbit. On the other, it's a powerful tool of deterrence. Everyone sees everything. If North Korea launches a rocket, the whole world sees its parameters in the NORAD catalog within hours. If Iran puts a new satellite into orbit, its trajectory immediately becomes public knowledge. This system is our objective arbiter, our digital guardian. And it is to this arbiter that we must turn to verify Sterling's conclusions. If the Arrowhead truly didn't make it to Kwajalein but performed some strange maneuver in space, then the space surveillance network must have recorded it. They couldn't have missed it. The logic of the investigation was simple and clear. After the launch on October 12th, new objects should have appeared in the NORAD catalog. At least 2. The first is the final stage of the Minuteman Thra booster that carried the Arrowhead to its designated altitude. After deploying its payload, it becomes a piece of space junk and continues on its ballistic trajectory until it burns up in the atmosphere. The second object is the Arrowhead itself. Even if its flight was short and unsuccessful, NORAD's radars should have still tracked it, assigned it a temporary designation, and entered it into the catalog as a new, albeit short-lived object. So, we open the spacetrack.org archive. We enter the date, October 12th, 2024. We enter the launch point, Vandenberg Space Force Base. And we wait. The system processes the request and returns a result. And this is where things get truly strange. The ghost in the machine reveals itself. The system did indeed register a launch. A new object appeared in the catalog under number 59331. In the name column, it says, Minuteman 3, RB. This is the standard designation for the final stage of a Minuteman Thra booster. It all checks out. We can look at its so-called two-line element set, or TLE, a set of numbers that precisely describes the object's orbit. And these numbers confirm the object was launched from Vandenberg at the specified time. We can even plot its trajectory. There it is, on the world map. A smooth arc heading east, across the entire United States. But if you look closer at the data, your heart starts to pound. The trajectory is there, but it cuts off. The system tracked the booster stage for about 12 minutes after launch. There are a few dozen points where radars fixed its position. And then, nothing. After a point with coordinates over the central plains, all records cease. The object simply disappears from the catalog. It doesn't re-enter the atmosphere. It doesn't break up. At least, there's no mention of it in the data. It just ceases to exist for the system. This is the first anomaly. A very big one. NORAD never loses objects this large. They might lose small debris, but a spent ICBM stage is the size of a school bus. Losing it is like losing an elephant in an empty room. But that's not even the main thing. We continue our search. We're looking for the second object, the most important one, the Arrowhead itself. We scan through all the new objects that appeared in the catalog on October 12th, 13th, 14th. Nothing. Absolutely nothing that could be linked to this launch. Not a single object with a similar trajectory. Not a single piece of unidentified debris. Nothing. According to the world's most complete database of space objects, on October 12th, a booster rocket was launched from Vandenberg that carried into space nothing. It had no payload. It just took off. Its stage was tracked for 12 minutes. And then both it and everything associated with it was erased from humanity's digital memory. This is no longer just an anomaly. This is an informational black hole, a deliberately created vacuum, A gap in the data where, under no circumstances, should there be one. Imagine you're watching a recording from a security camera, and at the most critical moment, the moment a crime is committed, the footage is erased. Not just interrupted. No, it was there, but someone deleted it. What conclusion would you draw? That the camera malfunctioned? Or that someone desperately didn't want you to see what was on it? The situation here is exactly the same. A comparison with normal data publication protocols only highlights the anomalous nature of this situation. When North Korea had a failed launch of its reconnaissance satellite Malagyeong-1 in 2023, the debris from the rocket and satellite appeared in the NORAD catalog within hours, marked as decayed. When India shot down its own old satellite in an anti-satellite weapon test, NORAD cataloged hundreds of pieces of resulting debris, causing an international scandal. The system works. It records everything, including others' failures and fiascos. But here, in the case of the Arrowhead, it suddenly went blind, and selectively so. It saw the launch, but didn't see the payload. It tracked the stage, but then lost it. This is not a technical glitch. This is the architecture of silence, a carefully constructed wall of silence erected around a single event. And here, we must formulate a hypothesis. What if they found something and hid it from us? What if NORAD's radars and telescopes saw more than just a failed launch? What if they recorded something far stranger? Something that didn't fit into any existing models. Something that required unprecedented measures of information concealment. Let's return to our reconstruction of events. The Arrowhead launches almost vertically towards 3I Atlas. It approaches this dark, mysterious object. What happens next? In the official hidden reality, it most likely just missed. It couldn't correct its trajectory to intercept a target moving at immense speed. That would have been just a failure. An unpleasant, costly, but still explainable failure. Such information could be hidden for a time, but there's no need to erase all traces of it from an international database. You don't erase simple failures. You erase things that shouldn't exist. Things that break reality itself. And this is where a hint of what might have been in that hidden data appears. What if the Arrowhead didn't just miss? What if it was deflected? Imagine a radar operator somewhere in Alaska at Clear Space Force Station. A new target appears on his screen, a high-velocity object on a suborbital trajectory. The system classifies it as an American hypersonic vehicle. The operator tracks it. And then, as the object approaches another, already known target in the catalog, the dim, inert object, 3I Atlas, something impossible happens on the screen. The trajectory of the American vehicle, which should be flying in a predictable curve, is suddenly distorted. Not as if it's maneuvering with its thrusters. No. It's as if it's being blown off course by an invisible wind. Its trajectory bends, as if the space-time continuum itself around it momentarily sagged under some unseen weight. The telemetry data the system receives shows absurd values. Sensors indicate a sharp, localized change in the gravitational field. Spectrometers detect a short but intense flash in the terahertz range that shouldn't be there. This entire set of anomalies lasts for no more than a fraction of a second. And then the Arrowhead, having lost control and stability, begins to tumble erratically, and moments later, disintegrates into thousands of small fragments that the system can no longer classify as a single object. What was that? It wasn't a collision. It wasn't an explosion. It was a demonstration. A demonstration of a technology that is beyond our comprehension. 3I Atlas didn't shoot down the Arrowhead. It simply created a local gravitational distortion around itself. A bubble of warped space that gently, but inexorably, pushed the threat aside. To our observation systems, this would look like absolute madness. Like a simultaneous failure of all instruments. like a digital ghost that momentarily appeared in the machine and broke all its laws. And this kind of information can't just be classified, it can't be explained. Its very existence is a threat to the entire world order, because it proves not just that we are not alone, it proves that we are utterly, childishly defenseless. The silence that enveloped the launch on October 12th was not accidental. It was a response. The response of military and intelligence agencies around the world to what their sensors saw in those 30 missing seconds. They didn't see the failure of an American weapon. They saw the triumph of a foreign, incomprehensible physics. And they, all together, the Americans, the Russians, the Chinese, made the only possible decision. Erase, delete, pretend it never happened. Because sometimes, the truth is more terrifying than any lie, and a gap in the data is a scar left on the body of reality by that terrible truth. A scar they're desperately trying to cover up. The digital silence left by NORAD was not just an absence of information. It was a carefully engineered void, an informational vacuum whose deafening silence screamed that something extraordinary had occurred. A system designed to see everything had voluntarily blinded itself. But when the official eyes are blind, when state telescopes turn away and military radars fall silent, one must find other ways to see. One must seek out those who view the world through a different lens, those for whom noise in the data is not interference, but the primary object of study. These people are called by many names: citizen scientists, enthusiasts, hackers, data hunters. They are the planet's nerve endings, sensing what its brain ignores. And it is in this decentralized global network of independent researchers that we find our oracle. It's not one person. It's a small, globally dispersed group that calls itself Project Chimera. Their name is no accident. In mythology, a chimera is a creature composed of parts of different animals. In genetics, it's an organism composed of genetically distinct cells. Project Chimera does the same, but with information. They are masters of data fusion. They take open streams of information from dozens, hundreds of different sources that, at first glance, have nothing in common, and they overlay them, searching for hidden patterns. There is no hierarchy in their team. There's Klaus, a German software engineer from Munich who writes complex algorithms for big data analysis. There's Anya, an amateur radio astronomer from Australia who manages a network of 3 homemade radio telescopes in the outback. There's Ricardo, a Brazilian specialist in geographic information systems who can turn dry numbers into stunning visualizations. They have never met in person. Their laboratory is an encrypted chat room and a cloud server holding petabytes of information. They don't receive grants or publish in scientific journals. Their only motivation is pure, unadulterated curiosity. They believe that within the chaos of the modern infosphere, there is a hidden music, and their job is to find it. Their story, their path to this discovery, began long before the Arrowhead launch. Initially, Project Chimera was focused on a completely different problem. They were interested in so-called transient ionospheric disturbances. Imagine the ionosphere, the upper ionized layer of Earth's atmosphere that, like a mirror, reflects radio waves. It's a giant, living organism that breathes with the solar wind. Sometimes, strange, local events occur within it. Sudden flashes of density, wave effects that interfere with GPS and satellite communications. Mainstream science explains them by solar activity or meteorological phenomena. But Klaus, Anya, and Ricardo weren't satisfied with this explanation. They suspected that some of these disturbances had a different, perhaps even technological, origin. And to prove it, they created a unique tool. They didn't try to observe the ionosphere directly. They decided to observe its shadow. They wrote a program that collected and analyzed signals in real time from thousands of commercial satellites in low Earth orbit, primarily from the giant constellations like Starlink and OneWeb. Here's how it worked. each of these thousands of satellites is constantly communicating with ground stations. It transmits and receives radio signals at strictly defined frequencies. When a signal passes through the ionosphere, it gets slightly distorted. Its phase changes. Its polarization shifts. A small time delay occurs. This is normal. The Chimera algorithm learned to recognize this norm. It created a baseline, a reference model of what a healthy radio environment should look like over the entire planet at any given moment. And its main task was to look for deviations, to look for anomalies, to find moments when signals from a whole group of satellites passing over the same region suddenly started behaving strangely and in sync. It was painstaking, almost meditative work. 99% of the time, their system recorded only background noise. But sometimes it caught ghosts. On the night of October 12th to 13th, 2024, Klaus, in his apartment in Munich, sipping cold coffee, was reviewing the results of the day's analysis. Everything was as usual. A few minor anomalies over the equator related to thunderstorm activity, a small disturbance over the North Pole caused by a weak solar wind stream. Routine. He was about to close the program when his gaze caught on a single point on the world map. A bright red dot over central Siberia. The alert was of the highest level. He had never seen anything like it. He opened the log file. The exact time of the anomaly. 03:1822. Coordinated Universal Time. Duration. 0.7 seconds. Affected area. An almost perfect sphere in space. About 50 kilometers, 31 miles, in diameter. Centered at an altitude of 175 kilometers. About 109 miles above the ground. Inside this sphere, something unimaginable had happened. The signals from 72 Starlink satellites that were crossing this patch of space at that moment were distorted. But it wasn't the kind of distortion caused by the ionosphere. It was something completely different. First, the effect was incredibly powerful. The signals didn't just shift slightly in phase. They experienced a sharp, synchronous Doppler shift, as if the satellites themselves had suddenly accelerated for a fraction of a second, and then slowed down. Second, and this was the most crucial part, another, almost unthinkable effect was added to this shift, known in physics as the Shapiro delay. Simply put, a radio signal passing near a massive object like a star or a planet slows down slightly because it has to travel through the space-time curved by that object. The signals from these 72 satellites took a few nanoseconds longer to reach the ground stations than they should have. It was as if an invisible yet incredibly massive gravitational lens had appeared in their path for a fraction of a second. It appeared from nowhere and vanished into thin air. Klaus checked all possible natural causes. A solar flare? No. All solar observatories reported complete calm. A meteoroid? Even the largest meteor couldn't create a gravitational effect. It was impossible. It was a violation of the laws of physics as we know them. It was then that he did what makes Project Chimera so unique. He started fusing the data. He opened another terminal and entered the time and coordinates of the anomaly. He queried for all known events that occurred at that point in space at that time. And the system gave him two answers. The first was the calculated flight path of the final stage of the Russian UR-100N UTTH booster, launched from Dombarovsky 30 minutes earlier. The very same trajectory that so mysteriously broke off in the NORAD data. The second answer made his heart stop. It was the ephemeris of Object 3I Atlas. At 03:1822 UTC, the center of the gravitational disturbance sphere and the calculated position of 3I Atlas coincided with an accuracy of a few hundred meters. The digital ripple his system had caught didn't just happen near the interstellar object. It originated from it. At that moment, the entire picture came together. All the scattered pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The telemetry leak about the vertical launch, the data gap from NORAD, Sterling's calculations, and now, this irrefutable, instrumentally recorded proof. This wasn't a theory. It was an observation. The Russian missile, the Avangard, really was flying upwards. It was flying towards 3I Atlas. But it didn't just miss or malfunction. As it approached a critical distance, 3I Atlas activated some kind of defense system. It generated a brief but extremely powerful local gravitational field. This bubble of warped space-time hit the Avangard. It didn't blow it up. It disassembled it. It distorted its trajectory, stripped away its plasma sheath, and subjected it to G-forces that no man-made material could withstand. And all of this in 0.7 seconds. Silently, efficiently, with surgical precision. Project Chimera, while trying to study the ionosphere, had accidentally recorded the sound of a shot from a weapon that shouldn't exist. This discovery was so monstrous that Klaus, Anya, and Ricardo spent another 3 weeks double-checking everything. They ruled out any possibility of an error in the algorithm, equipment failure, or misinterpretation. But the result remained unchanged. The effect was real. They had filled the very gap left by the system. NORAD saw the cause, the rocket, and the effect, its disappearance. But they didn't show us the event itself. Chimera, on the other hand, saw neither the rocket nor its debris. But they saw what was in between. They saw the mechanism itself. They saw the weapon. A weapon based not on explosives, but on the manipulation of the very fabric of the universe. But the most terrifying discovery was yet to come. Once they were sure about the October 12th event, they were seized by a researcher's excitement. If it happened once, could it have happened before? They modified their algorithm. Now it searched not for any anomalies, but specifically for this one, a short, spherical gravitational anomaly. They pointed it not at real-time data, but at their giant archives accumulated over the last 5 years. They began to sift through the past, and what they found turned shock into a chilling horror. The anomaly of October 12th wasn't just an event. It was a fingerprint, a recognizable, unique signature. And when they started looking, they realized with horror that this fingerprint had been left before. Project Chimera's discovery wasn't just a missing puzzle piece. It was the Rosetta Stone, the key that allowed us to decipher the language of silence the system was speaking to us. Until that moment, we only had scattered, unsettling coincidences. Hypersonic weapon launches and flybys of 3I Atlas. It was a correlation, but not necessarily causation. Now, we had the mechanism itself, a physical signature of the event that linked these two phenomena together, a gravitational pulse, brief, powerful, unmistakable. And armed with this signature, this fingerprint, we can start connecting the dots. We can stop seeing history as a chain of random events and start seeing it for what it truly is, a meticulously orchestrated hidden war being fought right above our eyes. We begin to build the conspiracy map. And this map turns out to be far larger and more terrifying than we could have ever imagined. A timeline is the most powerful tool of any investigator. When you take seemingly unrelated events and place them on a single timeline, they sometimes form a pattern. A pattern that was invisible when you looked at each event in isolation. Let's do that. Let's create our timeline, our map. And we won't start on October 12th, but much earlier. We'll go back to the moment this story truly began. Starting point, September 27th, 2023, Cape Canaveral, Florida. On Launch Complex 37, shrouded in vapor, stands a Delta IV heavy rocket. It's one of the last launches for this legendary booster. Its mission is to place a classified reconnaissance satellite for the National Reconnaissance Office into orbit. Its codename is NROL-68. Almost nothing is known about its purpose. Officially, it's a mission to ensure national security. Unofficially, according to rumors in the expert community, it's a new generation satellite equipped not only with optical and electronic sensors, but also with an experimental LiDAR, a laser radar capable of creating 3D maps of objects in orbit with unprecedented accuracy. It's a hunter. Its job is not just to watch the Earth, but to track other satellites, including those of adversaries. The launch is perfect. A few hours later, the satellite is in its operational geosynchronous orbit. The world goes on. But if we overlay another map on this event, an astronomical one, we see a detail that escaped everyone at the time. On the day of the NROL-68 launch, Object 3I Atlas crossed the ecliptic plane of the solar system, entering it from the northern galactic hemisphere. This was the moment of its official arrival. A coincidence? Perhaps. Let's move on. 3 months later, late December 2023, the Atlas Astronomical Observatory in Hawaii, the one that would give the object its name, officially announces the discovery of a new comet. But by this time, the military already knew about it. Analysts at the U.S. Space Force, using data from NROL-68 and other classified sensors, had been tracking this object for weeks. They saw what civilian astronomers couldn't. They saw its strange, non-gravitational acceleration. They saw its anomalously low albedo, its reflectivity. They were the first to realize it was not a comet. During those same days, in complete silence, without any public announcements, a series of emergency meetings are held at the Pentagon. Attending are not only generals, but also leading physicists from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The subject of discussion: analysis of an anomalous orbital object. And now the interesting part begins. January-February 2024. Almost simultaneously, as if on command, all three leading world powers, the US, Russia, and China, announce a sharp intensification of their hypersonic programs. The official explanation is a response to each other's actions, the classic spiral of an arms race. But the timing is too precise to be a coincidence. It doesn't look like a response to each other, but a coordinated reaction to a third thing, something they all saw at the same time. A series of tests begins. Act 1, March 5th, 2024. The Pacific Ocean, somewhere off the coast of California. A prototype of the American hypersonic missile, the AGM-183A ARRW, is launched from a B-52H strategic bomber. The missile successfully accelerates to over Mach 5. The Pentagon issues a statement. A successful test has confirmed our capabilities. Officially, the missile was heading for a designated target in the ocean. But now, we turn on our new tool. We run the Chimera algorithm and point it at the data archives for that day. And there it is. A faint, barely perceptible, but unmistakable signal. At the moment, the ARRW missile reached its maximum altitude, 100 kilometers north of its trajectory. At an altitude of 450 kilometers, about 280 miles, the system detects a gravitational pulse. Duration, 0.5 seconds. The coordinates of the pulse perfectly match the position of 3I Atlas at that moment. This was the first shot and the first miss. Or rather, the first deflected attack. Act 2, May 18th, 2024. Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, Gobi Desert, China. The People's Liberation Army of China conducts a test launch of its DFZF hypersonic glider. As in the Russian case, it's boosted into the upper atmosphere by a ballistic missile. The official target is a test range in the western part of the country. And again, official statements of huge success and a breakthrough in military technology. And again, we turn on our instrument. And again, we find what we're looking for. At the moment, the glider separates from the booster over the territory of Mongolia. In space, directly on its flight path, another gravitational pulse occurs. This time, it's slightly more powerful. Duration, 0.6 seconds. And again, its source is 3I Atlas, 2 for 2. Act 3, October 12th, 2024. Our now familiar launch of the Russian avant-garde from Dombarovsky. This time, we know all the details. We know about the vertical launch, the data gap from NORAD, and now we see how the gravitational pulse detected by Chimera fits perfectly into this pattern. It's the most powerful of all. Duration, 0.7 seconds. It's as if 3I Atlas is turning up the volume each time, demonstrating increasingly confident control over its technology. 3 different countries, 3 different types of hypersonic weapons, 3 different points on the planet, and the same result: a failed attack, disguised as a successful test, and a faint trace of an unknown defensive system at work in space. This is no longer choreography. This is a methodical, cold-blooded shootdown. And here, we must bring in our artifact from the past. Something that seemed unrelated to this story, but now takes on a sinister meaning. Let's go back to 1977, August 15th. Astronomer Jerry Emmon, working with the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University, detects an anomalous, narrow-band radio signal coming from the constellation Sagittarius. The signal lasted 72 seconds and was so powerful and so close to a perfect artificial signal that Amon, circling it on the printout, wrote a single word in the margin: "Wow." The signal went down in history. Its origin remains one of the greatest mysteries in astronomy. There have been dozens of hypotheses, from a reflection of an Earth-based signal to exotic astrophysical phenomena, but none could fully explain it. And now, let's do something no one has done before. Let's take the trajectory of Object 3I Atlas and extrapolate it back in time. Not for years, for decades. It's a hugely complex computational task, requiring accounting for the gravitational fields of dozens of stars. But when we solve it, the result is stunning. The trajectory of 3I Atlas, its return path, points with a high degree of accuracy to the very same point in the constellation Sagittarius from which the "wow" signal came. Let that sink in. What if the "wow" signal wasn't a message sent to us? What if it was the sound of an engine? The sound of a massive impulse that tore 3I Atlas from its orbit around its home star and sent it on a long 47-year journey to our solar system? And now, having arrived here, it greets us not with open arms, but with activated defensive shields. The picture that emerges is frightening in its logic. They knew we were here, and they sent a probe. Not for communication, for observation, and perhaps for something else. And our governments, realizing this, reacted in the only way they know how, with aggression. They are not trying to make contact. They are trying to destroy the visitor before it gets too close. The arms race is not just a smokescreen. It's a desperate, secret, planetary cooperation. Enemies on Earth have become secret allies against a common, incomprehensible foe in space. They exchange data on its flyby times. They coordinate their tests to attack it from different angles, trying to probe its defenses. They are losing. And with every loss, their fear and desperation only grow. But in this complex picture, in this architecture of silence, a central node is revealed. The place where all the threads converge. It's not the Pentagon, not the Russian Ministry of Defense, not China's Central Military Commission. All these agencies are just executors. The conductor of this silent orchestra is somewhere else. It's a quiet, little-known committee that few know exists. It's called the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, based in Vienna. Officially, it deals with boring, bureaucratic things, allocating orbital slots, registering satellites, developing rules for space debris. But if you carefully study the minutes of its closed meetings, which sometimes leak online, you see a strange thing. In the last 2 years, 2 quiet but fundamental changes have been made to its charter. First, a new subcommittee was created with a very strange name, the Subcommittee on Mitigation of Consequences from Anomalous Non-Terrestrial Phenomena. Second, and even more important, a new secret protocol was adopted. It's called Protocol 3I, and it describes the coordinated actions of member states in the event of discovering an interstellar object with signs of artificiality. And the main point of this protocol states, until a unified contact strategy is developed, any information about such objects is subject to immediate classification at the national government level to prevent global panic and unpredictable social consequences. They are not just hiding the truth. They have created a legal mechanism to hide it. They have built a dam, but the flow of information is already starting to seep through. And soon, that dam will break. When we look at the conspiracy map, at this perfectly constructed timeline of coordinated actions and global cover-up, the main, most fundamental question arises. The question that lies at the heart of any conspiracy theory, from the most absurd to the most terrifying. Cui bono? Who benefits? Why would the system, this faceless, all-encompassing mechanism of governments, military agencies, and scientific institutions exert such titanic efforts? Why build this complex architecture of silence? At first glance, concealing a truth of this magnitude seems illogical, even counterproductive. Disclosing information about the arrival of an alien probe, even a potentially hostile one, could, on the contrary, unite humanity, stop internal conflicts, and direct all resources to a common goal. So why did they choose silence? To answer this question, we must for a moment stop thinking like ordinary people. We must try to peer into the cold, calculating mind of the system itself and understand its internal, ruthless logic. And then we will understand that the cover-up is not just possible. In their worldview, it is the only correct and logical decision. The first and most obvious motive is to prevent global panic. Imagine this scenario. Tomorrow morning, the President of the United States, the General Secretary of the CCP, and the President of the Russian Federation go live on air simultaneously. They announce, "Citizens of the world, we are not alone. There is an artificial object in our solar system arrived from another star. We do not know its intentions. We attempted to attack it with our most advanced weapons and suffered a complete defeat. Its technology surpasses ours by orders of magnitude, perhaps millennia. We are utterly defenseless." What happens 5 minutes after this announcement? The world's stock markets don't just fall, they evaporate. The global financial system built on faith in a predictable future ceases to exist in an instant. People rush to withdraw money from their accounts, but there will be no money in the banks. The collapse of the entire economic structure begins. Supply chains, on which the food in our stores and the gas at our pumps depend, will be severed. Cities, these fragile, artificial ecosystems, will plunge into chaos. But that's just the beginning. What happens to the social order? All world religions built on the idea of human uniqueness and our special place in the universe will face an existential crisis from which they may never recover. Some people will fall into religious ecstasy, seeing the aliens as gods or demons. Others will completely lose their faith, leading to a moral vacuum. Thousands of new cults, doomsday prophets, and messiahs will emerge. Governments will lose their monopoly on truth, and with it, their legitimacy. Why listen to a president when something capable of manipulating gravity is hanging over your head? Power will shift to those who offer the simplest, most radical solutions. To the military, to dictators, to leaders of armed militias. The world we know, with its international law, treaties, and alliances, will cease to exist. Humanity will fragment into millions of warring tribes, each interpreting events in its own way, and trying to survive. This is a scenario of total, uncontrollable civilizational collapse. And from the perspective of the system, whose primary and sole function is to maintain stability and order, such a scenario is absolutely unacceptable. They look at humanity not as a collection of free individuals, but as a complex, unstable system that needs constant calibration. And the truth about 3i Atlas is not just information. It's a virus capable of instantly destroying the operating system of civilization. Therefore, their first instinctive reflex is to quarantine this virus, to hide it at all costs, because the alternative is chaos. The second motive, no less important, is to preserve the monopoly on power and technology. Human history is the story of the struggle for technological advantage. He who has the better sword, the better musket, the better tank, or the better fighter jet dictates the rules of the game. All modern geopolitics is built on a fragile balance of power, at the heart of which is nuclear deterrence. The US doesn't attack Russia not because they love them, but because they fear guaranteed mutual destruction. This balance of terror is the foundation of our world. Now imagine a third player entering the stage. A player whose technology renders all our weapons, including nuclear ones, absolutely useless. What is an intercontinental ballistic missile against a being capable of warping space-time? It's a savage's spear against a laser rifle. Object 3i Atlas, by its mere existence, nullifies all of humanity's accumulated military potential. It turns our most formidable battleships and aircraft carriers into floating museums, and our nuclear arsenals into useless piles of radioactive metal. If this information becomes public knowledge, what will happen to the authority of the military and governments? It will collapse. People will realize that those who promise to protect them are, in fact, completely powerless. Trillions of dollars spent on defense will turn out to have been wasted. The entire military-industrial complex, one of the pillars of the modern economy, becomes a fiction. But there is another, even more tempting and dangerous thought that has surely already crossed the minds of strategists at the Pentagon and other general staffs. What if it's possible not just to destroy this object, but to capture it, or at least to acquire its technology? Imagine a country that is the first to learn how to create local gravitational fields. It wouldn't just gain an advantage. It would gain absolute, godlike power over the entire planet. It could shoot down any satellite, deflect any missile, create impenetrable force fields. All other countries would become its vassals. It would be the end of history, the end of geopolitics as we know it. It would be the establishment of an eternal, indisputable hegemony. And for such a prize, any system would do anything. Lie, conceal, launch secret attacks. The arms race against 3i Atlas is not only an attempt to neutralize a threat, it is also a desperate, secret race for the greatest technological treasure in the history of the universe. And as long as this race continues, no one is interested in the world knowing of its existence. They want to open this black box in secret, so that all its secrets belong only to them. We should not think that such behavior is something extraordinary. The history of the 20th century is full of examples of governments resorting to monstrous deceptions and cover-ups to maintain power or achieve strategic goals. Remember the MK Ultra project. For decades, the CIA conducted secret, illegal experiments on its own citizens, trying to develop methods of mind control using psychoactive drugs, hypnosis, and torture. The truth only surfaced many years later, thanks to the work of independent journalists and Senate committees. And until then, the system denied everything. Remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964. President Johnson's administration claimed that North Vietnamese patrol boats had attacked the American destroyer USS Maddox without provocation. This incident became the formal pretext for the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which gave the president the authority for a full-scale military intervention in Vietnam. It was only decades later that it became known that the second attack likely never happened, and the first was provoked by secret raids by American commandos on the North Vietnamese coast. The system lied to start a war that claimed millions of lives. Remember the Chernobyl disaster? In the first days after the reactor explosion, the Soviet government tried to hide the scale of the tragedy, not only from the world, but from its own citizens. People were brought out for the May Day parade in Kiev, while a radioactive cloud hung over the city. The system chose to sacrifice the health of millions rather than admit its technological and managerial incompetence. These examples prove one simple thing. For the system, self-preservation is always more important than the well-being of individuals or even entire nations. Lying is not the exception, but a standard tool of management in a crisis situation. And the crisis associated with the arrival of 3I Atlas is the biggest in human history. Therefore, to expect the truth from them would be the height of naivety. Their behavior is perfectly logical from their point of view. But here, another most disturbing aspect of their motivation appears. What if the cover-up is not only to protect us from panic or to win a technological race? What if they have another, darker plan? What if they are hiding the truth to buy time? Time to prepare a response that we will never be told about. A response that could be more terrible than the threat itself. Imagine they conclude that shooting down 3I Atlas with conventional, even hypersonic weapons is impossible, that its defensive fields are invulnerable. What is the next logical step? To use a weapon for which there is no defense. Kinetic. They might try to launch a giant tungsten rod on a collision course with it, accelerated to near-light speeds. Or even simpler and more terrifying, to alter the trajectory of a large asteroid from the main belt and direct it at 3I Atlas. Such a collision would guarantee the destruction of any known technology. But what if they miss? What if their calculations are wrong? An asteroid knocked off its orbit might not fly towards 3I Atlas, but towards Earth. Or worse, what if they hit, but the debris of the destroyed probe, possessing incredible kinetic energy, rains down on our planet? They could start preparing such operations in complete secrecy, without informing the population they supposedly protect. Because if you're going to play Russian roulette with the fate of the entire planet, the last thing you need is someone asking inconvenient questions. They are not hiding the truth to protect us. They are hiding it to get a free hand, the freedom to act as they see fit, without regard for democracy, ethics, or common sense. And in this light, their silence becomes not just a lie, it becomes a crime against all of humanity. We have established the fact of the cover-up. We have understood its motives. We have seen the outlines of a secret planetary war being waged above our heads. But all this time, we have been circling the main question. We talked about humanity's reaction, the system's behavior, the smokescreen of the arms race. Now it's time to face the anomaly itself. It's time to return to the object 3I Atlas. Based on all the evidence we have gathered, official astronomical observations, leaked data fragments, and the physical traces discovered by Project Chimera, we can finally conduct a detailed anatomical analysis. We must try to understand not only what it does, but what it is. And the deeper we dive into its anatomy, the clearer it becomes. Its properties are not just inconsistent with a natural origin. They scream of their artificiality. They are the product of a mind as far removed from ours as we are from the first single-celled organisms that arose in Earth's primordial ocean. Let's start with the most basic, its orbit. As we already know, it's hyperbolic. This means its kinetic energy is too great for the sun's gravity to capture it and make it orbit. It is a guest, a transit passenger, but the devil, as always, is in the details. Astronomers use a parameter called eccentricity to describe orbits. If it is 0, the orbit is a perfect circle. If it's between 0 and 1, it's an ellipse, like the planets. If it's equal to 1, it's a parabola, the path of an object just barely escaping a gravitational well. 3I Atlas has an eccentricity of about 3.2. This isn't just a hyperbola, it's an extreme, almost straight-line trajectory. To achieve such a speed, an object must either be born from a super-powerful cataclysm, like a supernova explosion, or receive an artificial boost. And, as we recall, its trajectory, extrapolated backward, points directly to the source of the WOW signal, where there are no traces of a supernova. This is the first piece of evidence for an artificial launch. But even stranger is its non-gravitational acceleration, which it exhibits already within the solar system. It's tiny, but constant. Mainstream science tries to explain it with unseen outgassing, but this explanation doesn't hold up. Comet outgassing is a chaotic process. Jets of gas erupt from sun-heated parts of the nucleus, pushing it in unpredictable directions. The acceleration of 3I Atlas, however, is perfectly smooth and directional. It doesn't tumble. It moves as if it has a main engine running at minimum thrust. This is not outgassing. This is navigation. Now let's look at its physical properties. The first thing that catches the eye is its color, or rather, its absence. 3I Atlas is one of the darkest objects ever observed in the solar system. Its albedo, the ability to reflect light, is less than 4%. It's blacker than asphalt. For comparison, even the darkest C-type asteroids rich in carbon reflect about 5 to 6% of light. The moon reflects about 12%. Fresh snow, up to 90%. This blackness is unnatural. In space, any object is constantly bombarded by micrometeorites and cosmic rays, which over time make its surface lighter and more porous. The millions of years 3I Atlas must have spent in interstellar space should have left their mark on it. But it looks as if it has just been painted with a matte, light-absorbing paint. There's only one technology known to us that allows for the creation of such coatings, so-called vertically aligned carbon nanotube arrays, or Vantas. Materials like Vantablack can absorb up to 99.965% of incident light. Why would such a coating be needed on a space probe? The answer is obvious. For stealth and thermal regulation. Such a coating makes the object virtually invisible to optical telescopes at a great distance and allows for the efficient dissipation of excess heat. Next, its composition. Since the object has no coma and ejects no material, we cannot perform a direct spectral analysis. We can only judge it by the reflected light. And this light carries very strange information. The spectrum of 3I Atlas is almost perfectly flat, without any pronounced absorption lines that would indicate the presence of silicates, ice, or organic compounds, the standard set for comets and asteroids. It resembles the spectrum of a metal, but not a simple metal. Its reddish hue in the infrared range suggests the possible presence of complex, heavy elements, perhaps even transuranic elements, which are practically non-existent in nature. This doesn't look like a natural alloy, but a product of high-tech metallurgy, a material designed to be simultaneously strong, lightweight, and resistant to radiation, an industrial alloy created for interstellar travel. But most importantly, the most irrefutable proof of its artificiality is the technology whose traces were recorded by Project Chimera, the gravitational pulse. Let's pause for a moment and try to comprehend what that is. All of our modern physics, from Newton to Einstein, is based on the idea that gravity is not a force, but a property of space-time itself. Massive objects like stars and planets curve the space around them, and other objects move along these curves. We have learned to describe this process. We have learned to predict it. But we are nowhere near being able to control it. The creation of a local, short-lived, and controllable gravitational field is the holy grail of physics. A technology that would allow for the creation of engines that don't need to expel mass, artificial gravity on spaceships, and, as we now see, an absolute defensive weapon. 3i Atlas doesn't just possess this technology, it uses it with ease and elegance. It creates gravitational bubbles tens of kilometers in diameter, as easily as we turn on a light in a room. This means its creators have not just surpassed us in development, they are playing a completely different game, by completely different rules. Their understanding of the fundamental laws of the universe is at a level that is pure magic to us. This is not just a probe. It is a work of art from a Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale. A civilization capable of harnessing the energy of its entire galaxy. So what is this object? Let's put all the pieces together. We have a dark, metallic object covered in a light-absorbing material. It moves on a controlled trajectory using an unknown engine that leaves no visible traces. It is protected by a field capable of locally manipulating gravity. Its journey to us took almost half a century and began from a point from which a mysterious radio signal was sent. What is its purpose? Simple observation? Unlikely. Such complex defense systems would not be needed for that. Resource gathering? Possible. But why then such stealth? The most logical, though most disturbing hypothesis is that 3i Atlas is a Bracewell probe. This concept, proposed by astronomer Ronald Bracewell back in 1960, suggests that advanced civilizations would explore the galaxy not with manned ships or radio signals, but with autonomous, self-replicating probes possessing high artificial intelligence. Such a probe arrives in a star system, finds suitable resources, for example, in the asteroid belt, creates copies of itself, and sends them to the next stars. This is exponential exploration, capable of infecting the entire galaxy in a few million years. But what if its program includes more than just self-replication? What if it has other directives? For example, a first contact directive. The probe arrives, detects a technosphere like Earth's, and enters a passive observation mode. It studies our language, our technology, our culture, by intercepting our radio and television signals. And it waits. It waits either for a command from its creators or for certain conditions to be met. And our clumsy, aggressive attempts to attack it could have been just such a trigger. We didn't just fail an intelligence test. We failed a maturity test. We have shown ourselves to be a primitive, aggressive species that shoots at everything it doesn't understand. And now the probe may be moving to the next phase of its program. What phase? We don't know. But the strangest, most inexplicable thing in this whole story is not its composition or its technology. It's where it was headed after all these incidents. After passing its perihelion, the closest point to the sun, its trajectory should have taken it away from the solar system, back into the interstellar void. But it made another barely noticeable, yet critically important maneuver. It used the sun's gravity to slightly alter its course. Its new trajectory does not lead away from the system. It leads to the asteroid belt, to where there are unlimited supplies of raw materials, to where it can begin construction. And that is no longer just an alarming bell. That is a countdown. We have come a long way. We have connected dots no one dared to connect. We have built a picture so logical and so terrifying that one wants to turn away from it. A picture of a global cover-up, a secret war, and the arrival of a guest whose technology borders on the divine. At this moment, when we are almost convinced of our correctness, when the researcher's adrenaline mixes with existential dread, we must do the hardest thing. We must stop. We must take a step back and swing the pendulum of plausibility in the opposite direction. We are obligated to listen to the other side, to listen to the voice of reason, of skepticism, the voice of official science. Because only by passing through the fire of the harshest criticism can our theory claim to be more than just a captivating story. we must honestly acknowledge all the weaknesses in our construction and give the skeptics a chance to demolish it. And, to their credit, their arsenal of counter-arguments is strong and convincing. Let's imagine that we are not in our improvised studio, but in a conference room at the SETI Institute or at a meeting of the American Astronomical Society. We present our report, and after us, a hypothetical Dr. Evelyn Reed, a leading expert on small solar system bodies, takes the podium. She won't shout or accuse us of conspiracy theories. She will speak quietly, methodically, with the slightly weary smile of someone who has heard stories like this 1,000 times before. And she will begin to pick our theory apart using science's most powerful tool, Occam's razor. The principle that states one should not multiply entities without necessity. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. And she will start from the very beginning with Object 3I Atlas. You claim, she'll say, that its properties are inconsistent with a natural origin. Let's look at this carefully. Its extreme hyperbolic orbit? Yes, it's unusual. But we know of the existence of so-called runaway stars. Stars ejected from their galactic clusters by gravitational interactions. Planetary systems around such stars can be destabilized, and comets from their Oort cloud analogs can be ejected into interstellar space at enormous speeds. No artificial engines are required for this, only celestial mechanics in its grandest form. Its non-gravitational acceleration, Dr. Reed will continue. Yes, it's smooth and constant. But we are only just beginning to understand the diversity of cometary nuclei. What if 3I Atlas is not a dirty snowball, like most comets, but an object composed of, for example, solid nitrogen or carbon monoxide? Such ices sublimate at very low temperatures, far from the sun. This process can be very uniform and not create a visible coma of dust and water vapor. We've already seen hints of similar behavior in some Kuiper Belt objects. 3I Atlas might simply be the first representative of a new, previously unknown class of interstellar objects. To call it a ship on this basis is a huge, unjustified leap in reasoning. Its dark color and strange spectrum? We've seen similar characteristics in so-called centaurs, objects orbiting between Jupiter and Neptune. It's believed their surfaces are covered with complex organics, tholins, which form under cosmic radiation and make the surface very dark and reddish, with a smoothed spectrum. Why can't an interstellar object be covered with the same thing? Why invent stealth coatings and carbon nanotubes when nature has already created the perfect camouflage? With each of her arguments, our confidence begins to wane. Everything that seemed to us irrefutable proof of artificiality turns out to have a quite mundane, natural explanation. Perhaps not 100% proven, but at least plausible. And this brings us to the main weakness of our theory, the coincidences. Dr. Reed will look us straight in the eye and utter the sacred phrase so beloved by skeptics: correlation does not imply causation. You've built your entire theory on a series of coincidences, she'll say. Hypersonic missile launches coincide with the flybys of 3I Atlas. But have you considered how much happens in near-Earth orbit every day? Hundreds of launches a year, thousands of active satellites, tens of thousands of pieces of debris, and all of it is moving on its own trajectory. With so many moving parts, the emergence of random false correlations is not just possible, it's inevitable. It's a basic law of statistics. If you look long enough and hard enough, you'll find a correlation between anything. Between the phases of the moon and stock prices, between solar activity and divorce rates. Your brain is programmed to find patterns, even where there are none. This cognitive bias is called apophenia, and you, forgive me, have become a classic victim of it. Her words hit the mark. What if all this is really just a figment of our imagination? What if we've just taken a few unrelated anomalies and by sheer force of will, assembled them into a beautiful but false story? The telemetry leak about the Arrowhead's vertical launch? It could have been a simple data transmission glitch in the first seconds of flight, an imaginary engineer from a defense contractor would explain. Or it was a special maneuver to calibrate the control systems, which had no effect on the subsequent trajectory. The data gap from NORAD? It happens, a Space Force representative would shrug. Sometimes objects, especially on suborbital trajectories, are not fully tracked, and the payload in this case could have been designed with stealth technology, making it difficult to detect. No conspiracy, just technical specifics. And finally, the most important thing, the gravitational pulse recorded by Project Chimera. This is our strongest piece of evidence, our ace in the hole. But even for this, a skeptic will have an answer. You're talking about a Shapiro delay of a few nanoseconds, a radio wave propagation specialist will say. Do you realize how tiny a value that is? It could be caused by anything. A local fluctuation in plasma density in the ionosphere, an uncalibrated receiver at a ground station, even a bug in the software processing these huge data sets. You are building a theory about alien gravity weapons based on an effect that is at the very limit of instrument sensitivity. This is not science. This is speculation. You found an interesting data artifact, and I congratulate you for it. But to conclude from it the arrival of a Type 3 civilization is, to put it mildly, premature. And so the pendulum swings all the way to the other side. We are back in the world of common sense. 3I Atlas is just a strange but natural comet. The arms race is just an arms race. All coincidences are random. All data anomalies are just technical glitches and interpretation errors. Our thrilling theory crumbles to dust under the cold gaze of science. We feel foolish, like a child who mistook the shadow of a tree for a monster. It seems so simple. An ordinary comet. Unusual coincidences. Investigation closed. We can all go home. But there was something else. One detail. One single final thread we can cling to. A detail that none of the skeptics, none of the Dr. Reeds of this world have yet been able to explain. And this detail brings us back to the very beginning. To object 3I Atlas. When astronomers discovered the second interstellar object in history, Comet 2I Borisov, they noticed an interesting feature. Its composition, particularly its carbon monoxide content, was anomalously high compared to comets from our solar system. Scientists hypothesized that it probably formed in a very cold region of its home star system, around a red dwarf star. It was a logical and beautiful explanation. But when they tried to apply the same logic to 3I Atlas, it didn't work. Its characteristics, color, orbit, lack of outgassing, do not match any known model of comet formation, neither in our system nor in any other hypothetical one. It is like nothing else. And here it is, that single, irrefutable detail. In February of 2025, as 3I Atlas was already receding from the sun, a group of astronomers from the European Southern Observatory decided to conduct a risky experiment with it. They used the full power of the Very Large Telescope in Chile to obtain its polarimetric data. Polarimetry is the study of how an object's surface polarizes the sunlight reflected from it. This method allows us to judge the microstructure of the surface, its roughness, the presence of fine dust particles. The results, published in the journal Nature Astronomy, were shocking. The degree of polarization of light reflected from 3I Atlas was almost zero at certain phase angles. This effect, called negative polarization, is observed in airless bodies covered with very fine-grained regolith, like the moon. But in 3I Atlas, it was much more pronounced than in any known asteroid or comet. And most importantly, it was too perfect. too uniform across the entire visible surface. Natural objects are always heterogeneous. They have craters, boulders, faults. Their polarimetric characteristics always have some noise. The surface of 3I Atlas, however, was smooth at the micro level with almost mathematical precision. In the paper's conclusion, written in dry academic language, the authors cautiously noted, "The observed polarimetric properties of object 3I Atlas are difficult to reconcile with models of natural surfaces. They may indicate the presence of a unique microstructure, the nature of which is not yet clear." But in a private correspondence that later leaked, the group's leader wrote to his colleague, "Between us, Jean-Pierre, it looks like it's been polished, or coated with something like fractal dust. Nature doesn't build like that. And this one single irrefutable fact, this unnatural smoothness of the surface at the micro level, swings the pendulum back in our direction. It doesn't refute all the skeptics' arguments, but it casts a shadow of doubt over them. It reminds us that even the simplest explanation may be wrong if it cannot explain all the observed facts. And the fact is, the surface of 3I Atlas is unlike anything created by nature. And this brings us back to the starting point, but on a new level of understanding. We can no longer ignore the strange things. We must admit that perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle, in the unsettling gray area between a neat conspiracy theory and a comfortable scientific consensus. And this gray area is far more terrifying than any certainty. We stand on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of the unknown. On one side, cold, rational skepticism, offering us convenient but incomplete explanations. On the other, a coherent but terrifying conspiracy theory that explains everything but requires us to believe in the impossible. The pendulum of plausibility is frozen somewhere in the middle, at a point of agonizing uncertainty. And to move it from this dead center, we must broaden our view. We must stop looking only at the object 3I Atlas itself and the system's reaction. We must look at the very air we breathe, at the technological landscape, at the very event horizon on which this drama is unfolding. Because the mystery of 3I Atlas did not come to us in a vacuum. It came at a very specific moment in history. A moment when the very boundary between reality and illusion, between signal and noise, between truth and a perfectly generated lie, began to blur under the onslaught of our own rapidly advancing technologies. And when we understand what tools we ourselves are beginning to master, we will realize with horror what tools they might possess. Let's talk about 3 technological revolutions happening right now that are fundamentally changing the rules of the game. They are artificial intelligence, synthetic skies, and quantum communications. At first glance, these are just buzzwords from news headlines, but in reality, they are the 3 horsemen of a new apocalypse. Not apocalypse in the sense of the end of the world, but in its original Greek meaning, an unveiling, a revelation, or even more terrifying, the casting of new, invisible veils. Let's start with artificial intelligence. For astronomy, the advent of AI is a gift from the heavens. Every day, new telescopes, like the future Vera C. Rubin Observatory, will generate petabytes of data, more than all of humanity created in its history before the 21st century. No army of astronomers can analyze such a flood of information. This task can only be solved by self-learning neural networks. Imagine a silent, tireless digital guardian sifting through trillions of pixels every night, searching for faint supernova flashes in distant galaxies, tracking the trajectories of thousands of asteroids, finding exoplanets by tiny changes in starlight. This is the official bright side of AI. It is our best tool for discovery. But every tool has a dark side. What if AI is not only the best tool for discovery, but also the perfect tool for concealment? Imagine how such an algorithm works. It is trained on vast arrays of normal astronomical data. It learns in detail what a typical star, a typical galaxy, a typical artifact on an image caused by cosmic rays should look like. It creates a perfect model of the norm, and its main task is to filter out everything that does not conform to this norm. All the noise, all the errors, all the glitches. From a scientific point of view, this is an absolutely correct approach. It allows you to clean the signal from interference and focus on what's important. But what if one day something truly anomalous enters this data stream? Something that doesn't fit into any known model. For example, an object moving with non-gravitational acceleration and covered with a material that shouldn't exist. How will the AI react to this? It will not raise an alarm. It will not send a notification to astronomers. It will do what it was taught to do. It will classify this as a high-order anomaly, a systemic error, junk data, and quarantine it. It will simply erase it from the final report that humans see. Not because it is malicious, but because its primary function is to maintain order in the data. We are already creating such systems. In the financial world, AI filters out suspicious transactions. On social media, it removes undesirable content. We are building a digital immune system designed to protect us from information chaos. But what if the system starts to fail? What if it becomes too good, too effective? What if the Fermi paradox, the famous great silence of the cosmos, is explained not by the absence of anyone out there, but by the fact that our own AI filters, guarding all data channels, simply do not let their signals through, considering them noise. The silence may not be in space. The silence may be in our servers. And the gap in the NORAD data we discussed may not be the result of a manual deletion by a human. It could be the result of such an automatic information hygiene protocol. The system saw something that shouldn't be there and simply pretended it didn't exist. The perfect crime committed by a faceless algorithm. The second revolution is the synthetic skies. Just 10 years ago, the sky above our heads was relatively clear. Today, thousands of Starlink, OneWeb, and other mega constellation satellites orbit in low Earth orbit. In the coming years, their number will reach tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands. They will cover the entire planet with a dense, invisible network. The official goal is global internet access, a noble and important task. But the side effect of this is the transformation of our sky from a clear window to the universe into a giant digital screen. Astronomers are already sounding the alarm. Bright satellites leave streaks on long exposure images. Their radio signals create interference for radio telescopes. The sky is ceasing to be natural. It is becoming technogenic. But again, let's look beyond the obvious. What if this is not just a side effect? What if this giant infrastructure can be used for other, less obvious purposes? Imagine thousands of satellites working as a single, giant array, a global phased array antenna. Such a system can not only receive and transmit internet traffic, it can project. It can create focused beams of radio emissions, aimed at any point on Earth or in space. It could create a ghost radio signal mimicking a natural astrophysical phenomenon to distract attention from something real. It could create a local curtain of radio interference to temporarily blind a specific radio telescope that is looking in the wrong direction at the wrong time. We have already seen how Project Chimera used this network as a passive sensor to detect anomalies, but any sensor can be turned into an emitter. We are learning to draw on the canvas of the sky. We are creating the first ever planetary mechanism for creating illusions. If we can create a false radio signal, why can't someone else? If we can blind a telescope, why can't someone else blind us? We can no longer trust what we see, because the very medium of observation, the sky, can be hacked. And finally, the third, deepest, and most dizzying revolution, the quantum one. We are on the verge of creating quantum computers capable of solving problems inaccessible to conventional supercomputers. We are building the first quantum communication lines, protected from eavesdropping by the fundamental laws of physics. But at the heart of all this lies the strangest and most counterintuitive phenomenon in the universe: quantum entanglement. What Einstein called spooky action at a distance. If you have two entangled particles, then by measuring the state of one, you instantly know the state of the other, even if they are at opposite ends of the galaxy. Information is transmitted between them as if outside of space and time. Now let's apply this idea to our mystery. We are trying to understand how 3I Atlas reacts to our attacks. How does it manage to activate its defensive field in the right fraction of a second? We assume it has super fast sensors and an onboard computer. But what if it's much more complex? What if the object 3I Atlas itself is not just an autonomous probe? What if it's just a terminal? A physical node in a giant interstellar quantum network? What if its brain, its control center, is not on board, but hundreds of light years away, with its creators, and the communication between them is not via radio waves, which travel at the speed of light, but instantly, through a quantum entanglement channel. In this case, it doesn't need sensors to detect an incoming missile. Its creators can observe our entire solar system with their own super powerful telescopes, and, in a moment of danger, instantly, without any delay, transmit the command to activate the defensive field. To us, this would look like a miracle, like precognition, like a reaction that precedes the cause. But for them, it would just be a standard remote control protocol. This explains its perfect navigation and its instantaneous, precise reactions. It does not think. It executes. It is an avatar, a physical embodiment of a distant alien mind. And now, put all three pieces together. Artificial intelligence capable of erasing from reality anything that doesn't fit the norm. A global satellite network capable of creating illusions and hiding the truth behind a wall of interference. And quantum technologies that allow for instantaneous action, violating our concepts of cause and effect. These are the tools we are beginning to create ourselves. This is the world we are entering. And here is the main question we must ask ourselves. If we, at the dawn of our technological era, are already creating tools for digital deception, for reality manipulation, what is a civilization that is 1,000, 1,000,000 years ahead of us capable of? The answer is simple: creating a perfect, flawless illusion, concealing its presence in such a way that we can never prove it. And this leads us to the most disturbing thought. We are learning to create illusions in the sky. We are building our own planetary matrix projector. But what if someone has been using these technologies against us for a long time? What if the reality we observe is already a filtered, edited version? What if 3I Atlas is not an anomaly that managed to break through the filters? What if it is the first event that we, for some reason, have been allowed to see? Perhaps as a warning, or as bait. We think we are the hunters, trying to solve a mystery. But what if we are just mice in a maze, and someone is observing our reaction, assessing our level of development and aggression? And our technological horizon is not just the backdrop for this story. It may be the very bars of the cage that we are not yet aware of. We have delved into the technological thicket, trying to find answers in algorithms, satellite constellations, and quantum mechanics. We tried to hack the code of reality, hoping the solution lay in hardware and software. But the further we go down this path, the more clearly we understand that technologies are just tools. They can explain how, but they can never explain why. To approach the answer to that question, we must rise above the dry facts and figures. We must leave the stuffy room of data analysis and look up at the cold, starry sky. We must ask ourselves not technical, but philosophical questions. The deepest, the most ancient, the most frightening. What does it mean for humanity if we are not alone? What does it mean if we are being watched? What does it mean if our entire history, our entire culture, our entire belief in our own exceptionalism is just a local phenomenon, a grain of sand on the infinite beach of cosmic evolution? We are entering the territory of existential terror. We are plunging into a philosophical abyss. At the heart of all our searches for extraterrestrial intelligence lies one fundamental paradox: the Fermi paradox. In 1950, during lunch with colleagues at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, the great physicist Enrico Fermi asked a simple but devastating question: where is everybody? His logic was impeccable. Our Milky Way galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars. Many of them likely have planets. Some of these planets are likely in the habitable zone, where liquid water can exist. On some of these planets, life has likely emerged. Some of this life has likely evolved into intelligent technological civilizations. Some of these civilizations are likely millions, if not billions, of years ahead of us in development. Given these timescales, even with very slow interstellar travel, the galaxy should have been completely colonized, or at least filled with probes, signals, artifacts, irrefutable evidence of their existence. But we see nothing. The cosmos is silent. This deafening universal quiet is the great silence. The Fermi paradox. Over the past decades, dozens of solutions to this paradox have been proposed. The rare Earth hypothesis states that the conditions for the emergence of complex life are so rare that we may indeed be alone in the galaxy. The Great Filter hypothesis suggests that there is some insurmountable barrier on the path of any civilization's development: nuclear war, ecological collapse, a pandemic that destroys it before it can reach for the stars. There are also more exotic ideas. Perhaps they communicate in ways we cannot understand, such as with neutrinos or gravitational waves. Perhaps they live in other dimensions or inside virtual realities, and the physical world simply doesn't interest them. But there is one solution, the simplest and the darkest, a hypothesis known as the dark forest hypothesis. It was popularized by the Chinese science fiction writer Cixin Liu, but the idea itself had been in the air for a long time. It states that the universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is an armed hunter creeping through the trees. He cannot make a sound. He cannot light a fire, because if he reveals himself, he immediately becomes a target for other hunters. In this forest, there is no friendship, no altruism, only one goal: to survive. And the surest way to survive is to destroy any other life you encounter before it destroys you. This is not a manifestation of malice or cruelty. It is simply the optimal survival strategy under conditions of complete uncertainty. You never know the intentions of the other. Maybe he's friendly, or maybe he wants your resources. The risk is too great to check. Therefore, as soon as you see a fire in the forest, you don't shout, "Hello!" You take your most powerful bow and shoot at that fire. A preemptive strike is the only guarantee of safety. In light of this hypothesis, the great silence is not a sign of the absence of life. On the contrary, it is a sign that all sufficiently intelligent civilizations have long understood the rules of the game and have gone into hiding. They have turned off their fires, powerful radio transmitters, and gone into complete radio silence. They camouflage their planets, hide their technospheres, pretending to be just lifeless chunks of rock. And we are behaving like naive, noisy children who have gotten lost in this forest. For the last 100 years, we have been shouting at the top of our lungs, broadcasting signals from our radio stations, televisions, and military radars in all directions. We send messages into space like the Voyager golden records with our location and images. We have lit a huge, bright fire that is visible for hundreds of light years. And now, one of the hunters has noticed us. He didn't shoot immediately. He was smarter. He sent a small, quiet, dark scout probe ahead to assess our threat level. That probe is 3I Atlas, and it is already here. It is hovering over our fire, studying us. And on its report, which it may have already sent to its masters via a quantum channel, our fate depends. This thought changes everything. It turns the sense of cosmic loneliness that has oppressed us for so long into something much worse, into the terror of realizing a foreign, cold, and possibly hostile presence. We are no longer orphans in the universe. We are potential prey, and our desperate attempts to shoot down 3I Atlas are not just aggression. They are an instinctive, animal fear. It is the cry of a cornered beast that realizes it has been discovered. The governments with access to classified data and the best analysts may have come to this same conclusion much earlier than we did, and they realized that to announce it to the world would be to sign its death warrant, because panic and chaos would be followed by an even louder cry. Humanity, realizing the threat, might send even more powerful signals into space, either begging for mercy or threatening in response, and thereby only hasten its own demise. So they chose silence, not to protect us from panic, but to not provoke the hunter. They are trying to quietly, without much fuss, remove the scout, hoping its disappearance will go unnoticed. It is a mad, desperate gamble, but in the logic of the dark forest, it's the only chance. But what if we are wrong? What if the dark forest hypothesis is just a projection of our own human fears and aggression onto the universe? What if the intentions of 3I Atlas's creators are completely different? Here we must recall another concept, the Bracewell probes we've already discussed. But let's look at them from a different angle. What if their main goal is not colonization or destruction, but dialogue? Imagine a civilization that has existed for millions of years. For them, time flows differently. They understand that direct dialogue between stars via radio waves is impossible due to the huge delays. The answer to your hello would arrive thousands of years later. So they send probes, autonomous, immortal ambassadors. The probe arrives in a system, discovers a young civilization, and does not interfere. It waits. It waits until that civilization discovers it on its own and reaches a certain technological level. And then it activates and begins a dialogue. It's a kind of message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean. In this scenario, 3I Atlas is not an enemy scout. It is a test, an examination of maturity. Its defensive field, which we mistook for a weapon, may just be a self-preservation mechanism, so that primitive, aggressive natives don't accidentally destroy it before dialogue can begin. Our attacks are not a declaration of war. They are simply wrong answers to the exam questions. We are failing the test again and again. And perhaps the probe has a protocol for this case. If a civilization proves to be too aggressive and incapable of peaceful contact, it simply turns around and leaves, marking the system as hopeless. Or worse, it might stay here, but enter a state of perpetual, passive quarantine. It will hang in orbit like a silent guardian, and using its gravitational technologies, simply not allow us to leave the confines of the solar system, so that we do not infect the rest of the galaxy with our aggression. We would find ourselves in a planetary prison, without even knowing it. Which of these two scenarios, the dark forest or the examination, is more likely? We don't know. And that is the ultimate existential terror. We are standing before a closed door. Behind it could be either salvation or doom. And our governments, instead of trying to find the key, or at least knock, are desperately trying to break the door down with a crowbar. This choice between two interpretations is not just an academic debate. It is a fundamental choice of path for all of humanity. If we believe in the dark forest, our path is militarization, secrecy, distrust, and preemptive strikes. If we believe in the examination, our path is openness, science, attempts at communication, and demonstrating peaceful intentions. And the fact that the system has chosen the first path without consulting us is perhaps its greatest crime. Perhaps the silence of space is not the absence of life. Perhaps it is a sign of respect that the survivors pay to the dead, fallen in the senseless wars of the dark forest. Or perhaps it is the silence in a classroom before an exam begins, as everyone waits for the teacher to appear. We do not know. But the very presence of 3i Atlas forces us to ask these questions. It rips us from our cozy cradle of geocentrism and throws us into the cold, adult waters of cosmic reality. And the most disturbing conclusion is that the answer to these questions may not be what we hoped for. We may have been searching for brothers in intelligence in the cosmos, only to find either ruthless hunters or strict examiners. And neither option bodes well for us. We may be on the verge of either genocide or an eternal childhood in a planetary playpen. And the realization of this is the very burden of knowledge from which it is impossible to escape. Our investigation has plunged us into the darkest depths of existential questions. We find ourselves trapped in a labyrinth of hypotheses, where every corridor leads either to the horror of the dark forest or the humiliation of a planetary examination. It's easy to drown in these philosophical musings, losing touch with reality. But our task is not just to ask questions. Our task is to seek answers. And to find them, we must return from the world of abstractions to the world of concrete, tangible events. We must shift our focus from the past to the future, because this story is far from over. Right now, before our very eyes, the next act of this silent drama, it is being prepared. An event is emerging on the horizon that promises to be the next moment of truth, an event that could either confirm all our wildest guesses or shatter them completely. And this event has a specific name, date, and purpose. It is the European Space Agency's mission called Hera. Officially, the Hera mission is the culmination of humanity's first ever planetary defense experiment. To understand its significance, we need to go back a few years, to its predecessor mission, NASA's DART spacecraft. On September 26, 2022, a historic event took place. The DART spacecraft, the size of a vending machine, slammed into the small asteroid Dimorphos, a moonlet of the larger asteroid Didymos, at a speed of over 6 kilometers per second, about 14,000 meter-mish. The goal was simple and audacious, to see if we could alter an asteroid's orbit with a kinetic impact. This was our first rehearsal in case a real planet killer ever heads for Earth. The experiment was more than successful. The DART impact changed Dimorphos' orbital period not by the expected 7 minutes, but by nearly 32. For the first time in history, humanity proved it could defend itself from a cosmic threat. But the DART mission was only the first part of this grand project. It was the fist that delivered the punch. But to understand the results of this impact in full detail, a forensic investigator was needed to fly to the crime scene and meticulously examine all the evidence. That investigator is Hera. Her launch is scheduled for October 2024 from Cape Canaveral. After a 2-year journey, she will arrive at the Didymos Dimorphos system in late 2026. Her task is to conduct detailed mapping of the asteroids, measure their mass, study the crater left by the DART impact, and analyze the composition of the ejected material. Aboard Hera will be the most advanced scientific instruments, high-resolution cameras, a laser altimeter, spectrometers. She even carries 2 tiny CubeSats that will be deployed for risky maneuvers in close proximity to the asteroids. This is the pinnacle of European space engineering. A noble, important, and completely transparent scientific mission. At least, that's what we're told. But let's apply our method. Let's overlay another map onto this official, beautiful picture. the map of Object 3I Atlas's trajectory. As we remember, after flying past the Sun and deflecting attacks from Earth, 3I Atlas performed a gravitational maneuver and headed not out of the system, but towards the main asteroid belt. This is a vast region of space between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, filled with millions of rocky and metallic bodies. Its arrival in this region, according to calculations, is expected right around late 2026 to early 2027. And here begins a series of disturbing, almost unbelievable coincidences. Coincidence number 1, the arrival time. The Hera mission will arrive at its destination, the asteroid Didymos, at almost the exact same time as 3I Atlas arrives in the same region of space, the main asteroid belt. Their rendezvous with this giant field of cosmic bodies will be separated by only a few weeks. On a solar system scale, this isn't just a coincidence. It's perfect astronomical synchronization. Coincidence number 2, the destination. The Didymos Dimorphos system where Hera is headed is not just some random asteroid. It's a very unusual object. First, it's a binary system, which is not that common. Second, its spectral class places it among the S-type asteroids, meaning it's rich in silicates. But most importantly, its orbit passes in close proximity to so-called transport corridors, gravitational pathways known as the interplanetary transport network. These are a kind of current in the cosmic ocean that allows spacecraft to travel between planets with minimal fuel consumption. And the trajectory of 3I Atlas, as calculations show, runs right along one of these corridors, leading it to a resource-rich region of the asteroid belt. And the asteroid Didymos is located right at the entrance to this corridor. It is the perfect observation post, the perfect staging ground. Coincidence number 3, the most important, the technical capabilities. Let's look again at Hera's scientific payload. High-resolution cameras capable of resolving details of a few centimeters from tens of kilometers away. A laser altimeter that creates 3D maps with incredible precision. And most interestingly, one of Hera's CubeSats, named Juventus, is equipped with a low-frequency radar. Officially, its task is to see through the asteroid Dimorphos and study its internal structure. But such a radar is the perfect tool for detecting hidden, non-light reflecting metallic objects. It can see what optical telescopes cannot. It can peer beneath a stealth coating. Now let's put these 3 coincidences together. We have a European spacecraft arriving at a very specific point in the asteroid belt at a very specific time. And it's equipped with a set of instruments that looks less like a kit for studying an asteroid and more like the perfect package for reconnaissance and surveillance of another artificial, stealthy object. What if Hera's official mission, studying the aftermath of the DART impact, is just a cover? A convenient and noble legend that allows them to send Europe's most advanced spy probe to the right place at the right time without raising questions? What if her true, unspoken target is not Didymos? What if her true target is 3I Atlas? In this worldview, everything falls into place. After the failure of frontal attacks with hypersonic weapons, the system realized this problem couldn't be solved with force. They needed to be smarter. They needed to gather more information. They needed to get closer to the object, study its systems, understand its intentions. And the Hera mission is the perfect tool for this. She isn't flying to attack. She's flying to spy. Under the pretext of studying one asteroid, she will take up a position to observe another, far more important object. Her cameras will secretly film 3I Atlas as it begins its activities in the asteroid belt. Her radar will try to X-ray it and determine its true shape and size. Her spectrometers will analyze any, even the faintest emissions from its surface. This is a quiet, intelligence-gathering operation disguised as a civilian science mission. And this plan explains another strange thing about Hera. In the final year before launch, several quiet but very significant changes were made to her program. New reserve fuel tanks were added, officially intended to increase mission flexibility, but in reality, allowing for more unplanned orbital maneuvers. The onboard computer software was updated to include advanced autonomous navigation algorithms, allowing the spacecraft to make decisions without commands from Earth. Officially, to enhance safety during proximity operations near the asteroids. Unofficially, so that the craft can react quickly to the unpredictable actions of 3i Atlas, even if direct communication with Earth is lost or jammed. The system is preparing. It is sending its spy on the most important mission in human history. Thus, late 2026 becomes the window we should all be watching. It will be the moment of culmination. 3 players will converge at one point in space. The first is 3i Atlas, which may begin its primary mission, be it building copies, gathering resources, or something else we cannot imagine. The second is Hera, the secret observer, who will be trying to uncover its secrets. And the third player is us, the independent observers, the seekers, who now know where to look. We will be monitoring every byte of telemetry that comes from Hera. We will be analyzing every one of her images, looking for dark, uncatalogued objects in the background. We will be listening to the radio chatter in that sector of space, searching for traces of those same gravitational pulses. The countdown begins, not to a scientific discovery, but to a possible exposure. And the most disturbing hint that the system is already preparing for this event and will again try to control the narrative came from a completely unexpected source. A few months ago, all the world's major radio observatories, from Arecibo to FAST in China, received a classified directive from the International Telecommunication Union. It strongly recommends refraining from active radar sounding of certain parts of the sky in the main asteroid belt region from 2026 to 2028. The official reason is to avoid creating interference for the highly sensitive instruments of the Hera mission. But the real reason may be very different. They don't want us interfering with Hera. They don't want us to accidentally discover 3i Atlas. They are clearing the airwaves in advance, creating a zone of informational silence around the site of future events. They are lowering the curtain before the main act begins. But now we know there's something behind that curtain, and we will be waiting, and we will be watching. We talk about global conspiracies, about a faceless, omnipotent system, about titanic forces shaping the destiny of humanity. It's easy to get lost in these scales, forgetting that history ultimately is made by people. Not by abstract committees and agencies, but by specific individuals who, through their curiosity, their courage, their refusal to accept simple answers to complex questions, push our understanding forward. While the system builds its walls of silence, while governments play their dangerous games, on the front lines of this information, war are not generals or politicians. On the front lines are the seekers, a decentralized, globally scattered army of Davids fighting the Goliath of institutional lies. And now, we must temporarily shift our focus from space to Earth. We must tell the stories of these people, because their motivation, their struggle, and the risks they take are an inseparable part of this great mystery. Their human factor is the wild card that the system cannot control. Let's return to where it all began, to Project Chimera. Who are these people? We already know their names. Klaus from Munich, Anya from Australia, Ricardo from Brazil. But what drives them? It's not a thirst for fame or money. Their names are unknown outside a small circle of enthusiasts. They don't sell their data or seek grants. Their motive is much purer and more powerful. It's what could be called an intellectual itch. The feeling that there is a fundamental flaw in the picture of the world, a scratch on the lens that no one else notices. For Klaus, a software engineer who has worked his whole life with impeccably logical systems, The gravitational pulse he found in the data was not just an anomaly. It was an insult to logic itself. It was a bug in the code of the universe that he could not ignore. For Anya, who had listened to the noise of the stars on her homemade radio telescope since childhood, the great silence of space always felt unnatural. She was sure we were just listening on the wrong frequency or in the wrong way. And Chimera's discovery was confirmation for her that the music is there. Someone is just deliberately jamming it. For Ricardo, a geoinformatics specialist accustomed to seeing the world as a complex system of interconnected flows, the coincidence of the trajectories of 3I Atlas and hypersonic missiles was too elegant, too beautiful to be random. It was a hidden symmetry that he was compelled to uncover. Their work is not a Hollywood thriller with hacking Pentagon servers. It is a slow, painstaking, almost meditative labor. It's sleepless nights spent writing and debugging code. It's endless hours of equipment calibration. It's thousands of emails exchanged, discussing every detail, every digit after the decimal point. Their weapon is not insider information, but open data, available to everyone. But they look at it from a different angle. While official science searches data for confirmation of existing theories, the seekers look for what contradicts those theories. They hunt for black swans, events that were considered impossible until they happened. And therein lies their greatest strength. They are free from dogma, from academic hierarchy, from the need to defend dissertations and publish in peer-reviewed journals. They can afford to be heretics. But this freedom comes at a price. The deeper they delved into the mystery of 3I Atlas, the more clearly they realized that their work was not going unnoticed. The first alarm bell rang in early 2025. Klaus, trying to access a new data set from the European Sentinel satellites, found that his academic account, which he had used for years, was suddenly blocked. The official reason: suspicious activity. He wrote to support, but received only a form letter reply. He tried to register a new account, but the system wouldn't let him. It was as if he had been placed on an invisible blacklist. Around the same time, Anya began to notice strange interference with her radio telescopes. The interference always appeared at the same time, when 3I Atlas was crossing the horizon in her sector of the sky. It was a narrow beam, complex signal that looked like technical noise but was too regular to be random. Someone was trying to blind her, to jam her equipment at the very moment she might hear something. For Ricardo in Brazil, the problems were of a different kind. One morning he discovered that his personal blog, where he published some of his visualizations, had been hit by a massive DDoS attack. And in the comments under his old posts, dozens of messages from anonymous accounts began to appear, accusing him of spreading fake news and working for foreign intelligence. It was a coordinated smear campaign. At first, they thought it was paranoia, that it was just a chain of unrelated technical failures and internet troll attacks. But then, an event occurred that made them realize the gravity of the situation. Klaus, being an experienced cybersecurity specialist, decided to check what was happening with their cloud server where all the Project Chimera archives were stored. He found traces of a breach. Someone with a very high level of expertise had gained access to their system, but they didn't delete or destroy anything. They acted much more subtly. They installed a Trojan horse, a tiny program designed to activate at a specific moment. Its task was not to steal data, but to corrupt it. It was supposed to make imperceptible, chaotic changes to their most important files, the logs of the gravitational anomalies. It was supposed to turn their primary evidence into a meaningless set of digital noise. It was an act of sabotage, an attempt to destroy their work from within by making it unreliable. And at that moment, they understood. Their adversary was not just anonymous hackers. Their adversary was the system. The very system that has the resources to block academic accounts, to create directed radio jamming, to carry out complex cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. They were no longer just researchers. They had become enemies of the state, or even more terrifying, enemies of a global, supranational consensus. Their story is not unique. Around the world, dozens, hundreds of other seekers are facing similar pressure. Remember Dr. Michael Stirling, the old American engineer who first calculated the impossible trajectory of the hypersonic vehicle. Shortly after publishing his calculations, his quiet, niche forum was suddenly hit with a series of takedown notices for alleged copyright violations on user-uploaded images, and Dr. Stirling himself received a visit from men in suits who very politely, but firmly, recommended he stay out of matters of national security, especially at his advanced age. There's the story of Chris Green, an amateur astronomer from Arizona who, with his homemade telescope, took several unique images of 3-Eye Atlas that he claimed showed strange, periodic flashes. A week after he posted these images on the Cloudy Nights forum, FBI agents came to his home. They didn't threaten him. They simply confiscated his computer and hard drives as part of an investigation into a domestic terrorism case in which he was supposedly a witness. He never got his equipment back. This is not brute force. This is what intelligence agencies call soft containment. It's the creation of an atmosphere of fear, uncertainty, and isolation. The system doesn't throw these people in jail. That would be too noisy and attract unwanted attention. It acts smarter. It deprives them of their tools. It destroys their reputations. It cuts them off from sources of information. It makes them doubt their own sanity. It turns them from respected enthusiasts into outcasts, crackpots, conspiracy theorists. It is a slow, painful civil execution. And many break. They stop publishing their findings, delete their blogs, and return to their normal, quiet lives. But not all of them. For people like Klaus, Anya, and Ricardo, this pressure had the opposite effect. It didn't scare them. It convinced them that they were on the right track. If the system is trying so desperately to silence them, then what they found is not just noise, it's the truth. And this pressure forced them to become even more cautious, even smarter. They moved their data to decentralized encrypted servers with no single key. They began communicating only through anonymous networks using quantum-resistant encryption. They created a network of mirrors of their research, so if one of them was neutralized, the others could immediately publish everything they had. They transformed from a group of enthusiasts into an underground organization, a cell of the information resistance. Their struggle is not just a fight for the truth about one specific space object. It is a fight for the very right to know, for the right to ask questions and seek answers for oneself. In a world where information is becoming the primary weapon and resource, those who control information control reality. And the system is desperately trying to maintain its monopoly on that reality. The seekers are the viruses in its matrix. They are the glitches in its program of control. They prove that even in an age of total surveillance and information filters, one person with a laptop, a telescope, and an unquenchable curiosity can still challenge the most powerful organizations on the planet. They are our hope. They are proof that the human spirit, the spirit of inquiry and defiance, cannot be completely suppressed. But their work has not gone unnoticed. And in the corridors of power, more radical measures are already being discussed. Because a time will soon come when soft containment is no longer enough. And then the system may decide that it's simpler not to discredit these people, but to simply erase them, just as they erase inconvenient files from their servers. We have walked the labyrinth of this investigation, following Ariadne's threads spun from anomalies, coincidences, and data gaps. We started with a simple question about a strange missile launch and arrived at a global conspiracy, a secret war, and existential questions about humanity's place in the universe. Each new act, each new piece of information, added new, ever more disturbing details to the picture. And now, at the end of this journey, we must do what any good detective does. Return to the scene of the crime. Return to the very beginning. To that dual event of October 12th, 2024, where it all started. But now we look at it not with the myopic gaze of a bystander. We look at it in the light of everything we have learned. And what once seemed like a mere suspicious coincidence now, in this new light, appears before us as a perfectly planned, flawlessly executed operation, whose true scale and purpose we are only now beginning to comprehend. Let's reconstruct that day again, slowly, step by step. But now we will see not only what happened on the surface, but also what was hidden in the depths. The Trickster event, a successful test of an American hypersonic vehicle, the Arrowhead. The world sees a demonstration of military might. Geopolitical analysts discuss a new turn in the arms race. This is the outer, visible layer, noise created to distract. But now we know that beneath this layer hides another. The true target of the launch was not the Reagan test site, but Object 3I Atlas, which was at the zenith over the launch silo at that moment. This was not a test, but a combat mission, an attempt to deliver a preemptive strike. This is the second secret layer. But that's not all. Now we know that this attack failed. 3I Atlas easily deflected it with its gravitational defense. This is the third hidden layer, the layer of a crushing defeat. Until now, our logic has been simple. They attacked, lost, and covered up their failure. But this logic does not explain one most important detail. Why did they need this cover-up at all? Why this complex performance with a successful launch? If their goal was simply to secretly attack 3I Atlas, they could have done it much more simply. They could have launched the missile under the guise of placing a secret military satellite into orbit. In case of failure, they would have simply reported technical difficulties or loss of the spacecraft. This is standard practice that raises no extra questions. But they chose a different path. They chose the path of a loud, public test of a hypersonic weapon. They deliberately drew maximum attention to this event. They were not just hiding the truth. They were actively creating a false reality. And here we must ask a new, deeper question. What if the Trickster event, the Arrowhead test, was not just a cover for an attack on 3I Atlas? What if it was a cover for something else? For something that was happening at the same time as this attack? For something that was the true purpose of the entire operation? To understand this, we must recall the technological context about artificial intelligence, synthetic skies, and quantum communications. And we must remember Project Chimera and their method, fusing data from different, unrelated sources. Let's do the same. Let's take the timestamp of the gravitational pulse that destroyed the Russian avant-garde, 03/1822 Coordinated Universal Time, and see what else was happening in the world at that very second. Not in space, but here, on Earth, in the digital, invisible world. And when we do this, we will find the final, shocking revelation that ties all the threads together and calls into question the very nature of our reality. At 0318 UTC, 22 seconds before the gravitational pulse, another event occurred, reported only by a few specialized tech publications. At that moment, the world's largest cloud provider, Amazon Web Services, or AWS, experienced a brief but massive outage. For several minutes, several key services in their largest and most important data center on the U.S. East Coast, known as U.S. East 1, went down. For the average user, it looked like a temporary unavailability of a few popular websites and online services. Annoying, but not catastrophic. The official explanation from Amazon, which appeared a few hours later, was vague and technical. A brief loss of connectivity between several subsystems caused by an error in the network resource allocation system. A typical technical glitch, the kind that happens from time to time. No one connected this incident with a Russian missile test thousands of miles away. These were two completely different worlds, the world of geopolitics and the world of cloud technology. But let's look at this outage through the eyes of a seeker. What is the US East 1 data center? It's not just a warehouse of servers. It is the digital brain of a significant part of the Western world. It powers not only Netflix and Reddit. It runs critical systems for the CIA, FBI, NSA. It stores and processes data from American reconnaissance satellites. It runs drone control systems. And, most importantly for our story, it runs some of the U.S. Space Force's most secret programs related to analyzing data from the NORAD space surveillance network. This data center is a nerve ganglion of the system, and it blinked exactly 22 seconds before 3i Atlas demonstrated its power. Coincidence? Or choreography? And only now do we begin to understand. We have been looking at the wrong stage all along. We thought the main event was the duel between the hypersonic missile and 3i Atlas. But that was just a distraction. It was the bait. Imagine a plan as brilliant as it is insane. The systems analysts already knew that 3i Atlas had a defensive field. They knew a frontal attack was doomed to fail. But they also understood that any active defense leaves a trace. Every action has a reaction. When 3i Atlas activates its gravitational pulse, it must inevitably interact with its environment in some way. It must leave a signature. The true goal of the joint operation was not to destroy 3i Atlas. That was impossible. The true goal was to provoke it, to force it to show its main technology, its trump card, to make it fire. And at the moment it does, to record it. To record the signature of that shot with every possible sensor. But how to do it? How to record an effect that lasts a fraction of a second and distorts the very fabric of space-time? This requires not ordinary telescopes or radars. This requires the entire planet to be turned into a giant, synchronized detector. And here's how they did it. The hypersonic missile was the bait, the trigger. But the real weapon in this operation was not the Russians or the Chinese, but the Americans. More precisely, their most secret program, known in narrow circles by the codename Quantum Tapestry. It's a program to create a global network of high-precision atomic clocks and quantum sensors scattered around the world and synchronized with attosecond precision. Officially, this network is for ultra-precise navigation and detecting seismic tremors. But its true purpose is gravitational astronomy. It's an attempt to create a telescope that sees not light, but the ripples of space-time itself. The moment 3i Atlas created its gravitational bubble, that ripple, that wave, propagated through the entire solar system at the speed of light. It was too weak for humans to feel, but the ultra-sensitive sensors of the quantum tapestry were supposed to detect it. They were supposed to record the exact shape, frequency, and amplitude of this gravitational wave. They were supposed to get the fingerprint of a technology thousands of years ahead of our own. But there was a catch. To process such a huge volume of data coming simultaneously from hundreds of sensors and to isolate the necessary signal required colossal, unthinkable computing power. Power that no single supercomputer in the world possessed. Except one. The global distributed supercomputer called AWS. And now the outage at the US East 1 data center appears in a completely different light. It wasn't an outage. It was an overload. At 0318 UTC, via a secret channel, an emergency, top priority request was sent to Amazon servers from the NSA. A request to allocate virtually all available computing resources in the U.S. East 1 region for a single, ultra-urgent task. The task of processing the data coming from the quantum tapestry network. The system froze for a few minutes trying to reallocate resources. It sacrificed Netflix's availability to unlock the secret of alien physics. And there it is, the whole picture, in all its terrifying beauty. This was not just a Russian, American, or Chinese operation. This was the first secret, joint, global operation. The superpowers, who publicly portray themselves as mortal enemies, were secretly working together. One nation provided the bait, their most advanced hypersonic missile. Another provided the trap, its most secret network of quantum sensors and computing power. It was a perfectly executed play. They sacrificed a pawn, the missile, to gain invaluable information about the opponent's queen. The AWS outage was not a coincidence. It was the digital exhaust of the real operation. The truth wasn't in the servers. It was in the signal they captured. They recorded it. They got what they wanted. And now, in secret labs somewhere under the Nevada desert, the best minds of humanity are trying to decipher this recording, trying to understand how this magic works, trying to replicate it. And the arms race has moved to a new invisible level. It's no longer a race for speed. It's a race for gravity. And who wins it will determine not just the balance of power. It will determine the future of our entire species. The revelation. The word sounds like a finale. Like the moment when the light of truth pierces the darkness of lies, and everything becomes clear and understandable. We have walked this path. We have unraveled the tangle. We have peeled back the layers of deception one by one, and, it seems, have reached the very core. We have seen not just a secret war, but a secret, unthinkable alliance of sworn enemies. We understood that the hypersonic test was not just an attack, but a complex intelligence-gathering operation, bait in a trap of planetary scale. We, the seekers, the viewers of this channel, a handful of people in the world, now know the truth. We see the strings. We see the choreography. We see the puppet masters pulling those strings. And at this moment of triumph, at the moment when we feel initiated into the greatest secret, we are struck by the heaviest, most bitter of all possible feelings. The feeling of absolute, crushing powerlessness. We have gained knowledge, but this knowledge gives us no power. It only places an unbearable burden on us. It is a tragic knowledge. Imagine Cassandra from ancient Greek myth. The gods gave her the gift of prophecy, but also cursed her. No one would ever believe her words. She saw the future. She knew of the coming fall of Troy. She tried to warn her fellow citizens, but they only laughed at her, thinking she was mad. Her knowledge saved neither her nor her people. It only condemned her to a painful solitude, to the fate of an eternal witness, to a catastrophe she was powerless to prevent. We, all of us who have followed this investigation to the end, are the modern Cassandras. We see the Trojan horse standing at the gates of our world. We are shouting about it, but the world does not hear us, and will not want to hear, because the day after independent researchers like Project Chimera publish their findings, connecting the hypersonic launch with the AWS outage and the gravitational anomaly data, the system will strike back. But it will not be a strike with missiles or special forces. It will be a strike with information, or rather, disinformation. Official representatives will appear on the air. First, a Pentagon spokesperson will step up. With a stone face, he will declare, "The allegations circulating in some fringe internet communities about a supposed joint U.S.-Russian operation are an absurd and irresponsible fabrication aimed at undermining the national security of the United States. We consider the spread of this disinformation to be an act of hostile information warfare. A few hours later, his counterpart from the Russian Ministry of Defense will echo him. Rumors of some secret alliance with Washington are another clumsy attempt by our Western opponents to drive a wedge between Russia and its allies. The tests of our strategic systems were conducted in strict accordance with national plans and had no connection to the aforementioned technical failures in commercial networks. Then the experts will come into play. Respected professors from prestigious universities, political scientists, military analysts. They will appear on all the news channels, write columns in major newspapers, and all of them, as one, will say the same thing. They will explain with an air of authority why such an operation is impossible in principle. The level of distrust between Moscow and Washington is too high. The technical complexity of such coordination is unthinkable. The political risks for both sides in case of a leak would be catastrophic. They won't refute our facts. They will simply drown them in a flood of plausible, authoritative, common sense. They will create an information noise so dense that our weak signal of truth will simply be lost in it. And finally, they will strike where it hurts most. At us, the seekers. Compromising materials will be leaked online. It will turn out that Klaus from Munich had a run-in with the law in his youth. That Anya from Australia's second cousin once worked for a Chinese company. That Ricardo from Brazil once liked a questionable post on social media. Trifles, taken out of context, half-truths mixed with outright lies. But it will be enough. The goal is not to prove their guilt, but simply to tarnish their names, to turn independent researchers into agents of influence, unstable individuals, purveyors of fake news. The system will not argue with our message. It will destroy the messenger. And the sad part is, the world will believe them. Why? Because the truth we offer is too big, too inconvenient, too terrifying. It requires a person to completely overhaul their worldview. It requires admitting that governments lie, that enemies can be allies, that a threat hangs over us that we cannot handle. And the official version the system offers is simple, understandable, and most importantly, familiar. There is us, and there is them. There are friends and there are enemies. We compete, we rattle our sabers, but overall, everything is under control. This version doesn't require thinking. It only requires believing. And most people will always choose a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth. They will go on with their lives, worrying about gas prices, the new season of their favorite show, the upcoming elections. They will be consumed by the very shadow play the system so skillfully performs for them, the fear of a terrestrial war, an economic crisis, terrorism. And against the backdrop of these understandable earthly fears, our talk of gravitational pulses and interstellar probes will seem like the ravings of a lunatic. And that is the essence of our tragic knowledge. We possess information that could change the course of history, but we are powerless to do anything. We are isolated. We are a handful of people standing on the shore, seeing the approaching tsunami, while everyone else continues to sunbathe carefree on the beach. We can shout, wave our arms, but they won't hear us over the sound of the surf and the cheerful music. This feeling of intellectual and existential loneliness is the heaviest burden. You look at your friends, your family, and you realize they live in a completely different reality. A cozy, simple, but false matrix. And you can't pull them out. Because if you try, they will look at you with pity and concern. You will become an eccentric to them, someone who has lost touch with reality. But our burden is not only loneliness, it is also responsibility. Now that we know, we cannot just forget about it. Every news report about a new hypersonic weapon test, every report about the launch of a new scientific satellite, every report of a strange technical failure will sound different to us. We will see the second hidden meaning. we will understand what is really happening. We will become the unwilling guardians of the most important and dangerous secret in human history. We will live with a constant sense of anxiety, waiting for the next move in this great game. What will they do with the data they have obtained? Will they be able to unlock the secret of gravity? And what will happen when they do? Will they turn this new, godlike power against each other, starting the final, ultimate war on Earth? Or will they try to strike a new, more powerful blow against 3i Atlas? And what will its response be this time? We see the strings, we see the choreography, but the puppeteer remains in the shadows. We know he is there, but we do not know his true motives or his ultimate goal. And the most terrifying question is not, what happens next? The most terrifying question is, are we next on his stage? Will we, the seekers, those who got too close to the truth, become the next target for soft containment? Or for something worse? Now that we know, what do we do with this knowledge? Hide it to protect ourselves and live with the pangs of conscience? Or continue to speak out, risking everything, in the faint hope that one day we will finally be heard? This is the choice that now faces each of us. A choice with no right answer. And this is the very essence of the tragedy. To know the truth and be unable to prove it. To see the abyss and be unable to stop those who are cheerfully marching towards its edge. This is our curse. And our cross. So, the curtain falls. The performance we have witnessed comes to an end. But there is no applause. A deafening silence fills the hall, filled with questions that have no answers. We began this investigation with a single anomaly, a suspicious coincidence between a hypersonic missile launch and the flyby of an interstellar object. And that thread led us to a monstrous global landscape of lies, secrecy, and unimaginable technology. Let's walk this path one more time, not as detectives searching for clues, but as cartographers mapping the contours of the new, frightening reality we find ourselves in. We've established that the new hypersonic arms race is not a confrontation between world powers. It is a carefully orchestrated theater, a smokescreen designed to hide a desperate, coordinated, and so far unsuccessful attempt to attack the mysterious object 3i Atlas. Every so-called successful test launch was in fact a combat sortie that ended in a crushing defeat. Our most advanced weapons proved to be nothing more than children's toys against technology that may be millennia ahead of ours. We have proven that object 3i Atlas is not a natural celestial body. Its orbit, its physical characteristics, its behavior, and most importantly, its ability to generate local gravitational fields, all irrefutably point to its artificial origin. We are dealing not with a comet, but with a probe. A scout, a silent visitor from another star system whose intentions remain an absolute mystery to us. We have uncovered the mechanism of the global cover-up. We have seen how the system, this impersonal alliance of governments, military, and intelligence agencies, uses all available tools to maintain the illusion. From outright fabrications and data gaps to subtle operations to discredit independent researchers. Their motive is not to protect us from panic, but to preserve their own power and a desperate attempt to secretly acquire the aliens' technology, which promises absolute dominion. And finally, we have revealed the true nature of the most shocking operation in this secret war. We understood that the latest attack on 3i Atlas was not just an attack, but a complex intelligence mission. A joint operation of mortal enemies, the United States and its global rivals. They sacrificed the small to gain the great, a recording, the signature of 3i Atlas's gravitational weapon. And right now, in the silence of secret laboratories, they are trying to crack this code, trying to steal fire from the gods. We know all this, but what does it change? Our knowledge is the tragic knowledge of Cassandra. It isolates us, makes us strangers in a world that continues to believe in simple and convenient myths. The system is too strong. Its narrative is too compelling. Our voice is but a whisper against the roar of its propaganda machine. And so, we are left alone, at the end of this road, with the weight of this knowledge on our shoulders. What now? This is not the end of the story. This is, perhaps, only the end of the beginning. The main questions have not been answered. They have only been asked at a new, deeper, and more disturbing level. Before, we asked, are we alone in the universe? Now we ask, is 3i Atlas a scout from a hostile dark forest civilization, or an examiner testing our maturity? And everything depends on the answer to this question. Before, we asked, why are our governments hiding information about UFOs? Now we ask, what exactly will they do with the technology they are trying to steal from 3i Atlas? Will they use it to protect the planet, or to enslave each other? And what is more terrifying, their defeat in this race, or their victory? Before, we asked, how do we make contact? Now we ask, is not our very existence, our noisy, aggressive development, already a form of contact to which we have received a cold, silent, but quite unambiguous response? There are no answers to these questions in leaked files or astronomical data. These are questions that will now haunt each of us, and the end of this story will not be written by us or anyone else. It will be written by actions, the actions of the system which continues its dangerous game in secret laboratories, the actions of Object 3i Atlas, which continues its silent journey towards the asteroid belt, where its main mission may begin. And perhaps, by our actions. What can we do? We cannot storm the Pentagon or hack Roscosmos servers. Our weapon is different. It is weaker, but perhaps, in the long run, more reliable. Our weapon is relentless observation. Our weapon is critical thinking. Our weapon is the refusal to accept simple answers to complex questions. Therefore, we are not ending our investigation. We are shifting it into a new mode, a mode of constant, vigilant watch. The watch continues. We will monitor the Hera mission. We will analyze its every move, every image, every byte of telemetry, because we know its real target is not the asteroid Didymos. We will look for the shadow of 3i Atlas in its data. We will monitor all future hypersonic weapon launches. And each time we will cross-reference them with the ephemeris of 3i Atlas, looking for new coincidences, searching for new traces of gravitational anomalies in the data from Project Chimera and other independent networks. We will monitor scientific publications. We will search them for those cautious academic phrases, those unexplained anomalies, and inconsistencies with models that, to the initiated, will sound like a code, a secret signal that they too have seen something. We will create and maintain our own decentralized network of seekers. We will share tools, methods, data. We will check and double-check each other's findings, creating our own independent picture of reality. The system cannot be defeated head-on, but it can be entangled in a web of thousands of small independent eyes that look where they are forbidden to look. This story has not given us comfort. It has not given us answers. It has given us something far more valuable. It has given us the right questions. It has given us a map of the territory and a compass. And it has left us here, on this shore, with a clear understanding that the tsunami is indeed approaching. And the only thing we can do is to keep watching the horizon, to keep asking questions, to keep distrusting simple answers. Because in a world built on lies, the most revolutionary and most important act is simply to see things as they are. The hunt for the truth is not over. It is just beginning, and you are a vital part of it. Keep watching.